Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time when the American dream had a pretty bad hangover. It's the fall of 1929, and you're standing on a busy street in Lower Manhattan, watching men in suits clutching their heads, stock tickers rattling like the world's most annoying alarm clock, and newspapers flapping like panicked birds. The economy has just belly flopped into history's most infamous puddle, and you're right in the middle of it. Congratulations. There's a strange stillness after a crash. Not the peaceful kind. More like the stunned silence in a room where someone's just knocked over an expensive vase. The Jazz Age glitter has gone dull overnight, and all that roaring in the 20s? Turns out it was mostly hot air. Your wallet feels suspiciously light. Your shoes suddenly feel very secondhand. And your neighbor? He's selling apples for 5 cents on the corner because that's less humiliating than admitting Wall Street just ate his savings. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past banks with locked doors and out-of-business signs so common they might as well be wallpaper. Your breath fogs slightly, even indoors. It's October, and the heating bill isn't going to pay itself. You feel a strange blend of panic and politeness in the air, like America is trying to keep up appearances while frantically padding its pockets for loose change. Men in tweed coats clutch briefcases that no longer hold value, just old receipts. Maybe a crust of sandwich and dashed hopes. A few are selling pencils. Others just stare blankly ahead, unsure if the crash is real or just some awful extended hangover. Historians still argue whether the Great Depression was an inevitable consequence of reckless spending and unregulated markets, or whether it could have been softened by better policies. Either way, for you and millions of others, it's no longer a theory. It's Tuesday, and there's no milk in the icebox. You visit the grocery store or what's left of it. Shelves are sparsely stocked, not because the supply chain failed, but because nobody can afford much. A pound of beans now feels like a luxury item. You count your coins 3 times before buying a single loaf of bread. This rye, which you used to hate, now it tastes like relief. At home, the radio coughs static. You fiddle with the dial until a man's voice cracks through. A calm narrator announcing layoffs, bank closures, and somehow baseball scores as if Babe Ruth could still knock the nation out of this slump with one good swing. Your upstairs neighbors are arguing again. Not shouting, just that tired rhythm of despair and misunderstanding. They've had to take in her brother's family. 7 people in a 2-room apartment. You swear you can hear the stress in the floorboards. And yet, oddly enough, the world doesn't fall apart. Not quite. People start adjusting. Saving buttons, trading stories, fixing things instead of replacing them. You notice small signs of stubborn resilience, like the teenage boy who shines shoes with the seriousness of a surgeon, or the old woman who grows tomatoes in cracked teapots by the window. You visit a friend who used to be a junior stockbroker. He's now sweeping floors at a hotel but somehow seems lighter. At least I know what I'm worth now, he jokes badly. You both laugh because the only other option is crying. One of your favorite moments each day is walking past the city fountain, now dry and leaf-filled, where someone's carved "This too shall pass" into the stone. It's amateur work, probably done with a pocket knife, but the words stick with you like a song you never meant to memorize. Back home, you sit at your kitchen table, notebook in hand. You try to write a letter to your cousin in Oklahoma. He's been sending dust in his envelopes lately. Says it's easier than explaining the storms. You want to send something back, something comforting. But words feel heavy, like coins you don't want to spend unless you're sure they matter. You settle instead for drawing a smiley face on a napkin. It's crooked, but that feels appropriate. Later, as you lie down in bed, with springs that squeak like stage actors trying to exit gracefully, you think, this is not the life I planned, but maybe it's still a life worth planning for. And despite the empty wallet by your bedside, there's a warmth in your chest, a full-hearted sort of ache. You're broke, sure, but not broken. Not yet. Morning comes early when your sleep is thin and your stomach thinner. The light filters in through threadbare curtains, already gold and sharp before breakfast has even been considered. You stretch beneath a quilt that's seen better decades. Patches of patches now. But it's warm, and in this time that's enough of a win to count. You make your way to the kitchen. The tap gives you cold water with a reluctant gurgle. You toast a single slice of bread over the flame of a gas stove, turning it carefully so it doesn't burn. No butter, no jam, just warmth and crunch. Then it's out into the street again, where the air is already busy with footsteps and hushed conversations. People are always walking now, walking to find work, walking to stretch hope, walking just to be doing something. The job boards have more dust than jobs, but you go anyway because what else is there? You find a line already forming outside a warehouse. Rumor of a day job spreading faster than ink. Men stand silently, collars pulled high. A few women too, eyes focused straight ahead. Dignity held like an umbrella against drizzle. You join them not because you expect anything, just because not joining would feel like giving up. Historians still debate just how much New Deal programs truly alleviated these kinds of scenes, whether FDR's alphabet soup of agencies was bomb or just bandage. But right now, in this line, those questions feel distant. What matters is whether someone with a clipboard will step outside and say, "We'll take 10 today." You don't get picked. That's all right. You knew the odds. You give a nod to the man beside you, the silent solidarity of rejection, and walk on. By midday, you find yourself by the rail yard. The hobo camps are growing. They're called Hoovervilles now. Tongue-in-cheek nicknames for President Hoover, whose inability to fix things is becoming the national hobby to mock. Cardboard shacks, old tin roofs held down with stones, shoes repurposed from tire rubber, and always a fire barrel. The fire's not just for warmth. It's a gathering place, a newsstand, a therapist's couch. You sit beside one and share a can of beans with a man named Carl. He says he used to own a watch store in St. Louis. Now he just watches trains. You trade stories. Not because you need to, because it's polite. Because talking makes the food last longer. Carl teaches you a trick for sleeping on boxcars. Stuff your coat with newspaper to keep the cold out. They print lies, he chuckles. But they hold heat. At the far edge of the camp, a girl sings to herself as she skips along a path made of crushed tin cans. Her voice is high and haunting, like a memory of something sweet. No one stops her. Joy, however small, is sacred now. You pass a man painting on flattened cereal boxes, landscapes of places he's never seen. He calls them someday paintings. You buy one for a dime, your last dime. There's a cabin in the woods with smoke curling from the chimney. You pin it to your wall later, where it immediately makes your room look less like a box and more like a future. On your way home, you walk through the public library. It's one of the few places that still feels untouched by ruin. Warm, hushed, and lined with silent companions. You run your fingers along the spines of books you can't afford to keep but can borrow like a dream. A copy of Emerson's essays falls open in your hands. The page reads, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." You close it slowly, letting the words settle. Then you check it out along with a cookbook, one that explains how to make stew from practically nothing and dignity from even less. Outside, rain begins. Light and polite at first, then steadier. You pull your collar up and think of that line from the book. Destiny, it seems, is just another word for stubbornness with a plan. Back home, your neighbor's kid knocks on the door. She offers you a hard candy, probably her only one, just because. You accept it like it's gold. Later, you wrap the wrapper around your finger like a ring, just for fun. In bed that night, you listen to the rain tapping like an old friend at the window. You think of Carl, of the girl skipping, of the painter with the cereal box canvas. And you think, maybe this country's still got something under the rubble. You drift off slowly, heart still full, even if the wallet's not. Morning again. The sun takes its time, lazily bleeding into the streets as you sit by the window with your chipped enamel mug of hot water and a teaspoon of sugar, your version of coffee. You watch as the town comes alive, if it can be called that. Alive might be too generous. It limps, really, but even a limp means it's still moving. Your neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, waves from her porch. She's knitting something that might be a scarf or a future blanket. Or maybe she's just knitting to keep her fingers from remembering arthritis. She asks if you'll help her hang her laundry later. She still washes it by hand in a rust-stained tub, and her clothesline sags like it knows too much. The postman walks by. You don't expect anything, and you're right, but it's still nice to see him. His uniform is pressed like the Depression forgot to touch it. There's something almost heroic about that in its own way. Today's goal is simple. Get to the church basement before the soup runs out. The line is longer than usual, winding past the broken fountain and wrapping around the block like a sad parade. The man in front of you jokes that the soup today might be flavored with optimism. You laugh, mostly out of politeness. Optimism is a rare spice now. You finally get your bowl, thin, mostly liquid, but hot. A single carrot slice floats like a survivor on a lifeboat. You spoon it slowly. Across the table, a teenage boy counts crackers like he's budgeting a fortune. You offer him yours. He blinks, surprised, then smiles like someone just handed him a second chance. Historians still argue whether mutual aid efforts like these church meals did more good than harm, whether they preserved dignity or made people too reliant on charity. But right now, slurping your soup beside strangers who say, "Thank you," with their eyes, it sure doesn't feel like harm. After lunch, you walk to the school. It's closed on Fridays now, budget cuts. But Miss Lillian, the teacher, keeps the doors open for what she calls porch school. She sits outside with a stack of chalk and a patience forged in something stronger than paychecks. Kids gather around, scribbling math on the steps and spelling words in the dirt. You sit nearby, not as a student, but as someone who just misses the sound of hope. Miss Lillian asks one of the kids to spell resilience. He gets it wrong, but she gives him a gold star anyway, drawn in crayon on a scrap of brown paper. The boy beams like he just earned his way out of this decade. A few blocks over, the barbershop is open, but only half functional. One chair, no hot towels, and a sign that says, "Pay what you can, or don't." You sit for a trim. The barber tells you about the time he gave a haircut to a man who paid in rhubarb. It was fresh rhubarb, he shrugs. Couldn't say no. You offer to sweep the floor as payment. He nods like you just handed him $100. Later that afternoon, you visit the public park. It's emptier these days. No brass bands, no picnics, just memories clinging to the benches. A harmonica player sits under a tree, playing something mournful and waltzing all at once. You recognize the tune, though you couldn't name it. It sounds like the 1930s feel. You sit on a bench and think about how odd it is, this idea of doing less but feeling more. You have fewer possessions than ever, but every one of them has a story. Your coat isn't just a coat. It's the thing that carried you through the snowstorm last January. Your shoes aren't just shoes, they've walked more miles than some cars. Everything is worn, but everything matters. You pass a boy selling pencils. He doesn't say much, just holds the tray in front of him like a magician offering invisible tricks. You buy one even though you don't need it. Later, you'll use it to write a letter you'll never send, just to remember what it feels like to string thoughts into something gentle. As the day winds down, you stop by a makeshift baseball game. No gloves, one bat, a ball wrapped in twine. A swing connects. Someone cheers. For a moment, the sound of depression lifts, replaced by pure, untaxed joy. You return home as the sky bruises into twilight. Mrs. Ellison has left you a jar of beans by your door. There's a note. Tomorrow will still come. You don't know what to say to that, so you say nothing. You eat slowly, watching the dark settle in. From your window, the lamplight glows on faces that carry on anyway. It's not victory, but it's not defeat either. You climb into bed, wrap your quilt tight, and whisper the spelling of resilience to yourself as your eyes drift shut. The rooster across the alley crows like he owns the morning, but you've been awake since before the birds. Your sleep these days is like everything else. Fragmented, a little thin, stitched together with habit more than rest. Still, you stretch your arms, feel your shoulders crackle like old pages. and begin the day with a task you've come to cherish. Fixing things. Not big things. You don't have the parts or the tools or the patience. But small things, yes. You darn socks with mismatched thread. You oil hinges with bacon grease. You sand a splintered chair leg down with the heel of an old shoe. There's something oddly comforting about putting the world back together one squeaky drawer at a time. You remember when people used to throw things away just because they were old. Not anymore. Now, a cracked mirror is still a mirror. A chipped bowl is just more special. Imperfection has become a kind of beauty, one that remembers. Today, the radio, your prized possession, crackles to life with a segment on President Roosevelt. The voice is staticky, halfway between a whisper and a warble, but you catch the words New Deal. Everyone's been talking about it. WPA, CCC. Alphabet soup that might just save the country. You wonder if you'll get picked for a work program. You're not young, but you've got arms and you know how to swing a hammer. Maybe they'll need someone to dig a ditch or plant trees or sweep out a future that still seems a little foggy. Historians still argue whether the New Deal actually ended the Depression or just dressed it up in better clothes. But for now, it feels like someone, somewhere, is finally noticing that you exist, and that's no small thing. Midday takes you to the library. It's one of the last warm places in town that doesn't expect anything in return. You run your fingers along the shelves, dust like velvet under your touch. You pick a book at random, sit under a patch of sun, and begin to read. It's about Lewis and Clark, bold men in boats with maps barely filled in. You imagine them paddling through rivers you've never seen, staring down the same kind of uncertainty that knots your own belly. At least they had each other. You turn the page, imagining you're with them, camping by some nameless stream, burning meat over an open fire. You smile, then sneeze. The book is dustier than it looks. A little girl sits down nearby. She's coloring on the back of an overdue notice. Her tongue pokes out in concentration as she tries to draw a house with a chimney puffing smoke. You glance down. There's no door on the house. You point gently. You forgot the way in. You whisper. She grins, adds it, and hands you the drawing without a word. You tuck it into your coat pocket. Later, you'll pin it up beside your bed. Afternoon brings another round of job hunting, which is mostly walking from place to place and getting the same apologetic headshake. You try the corner grocer. The man behind the counter frowns and says, "We're hiring in spirit," if that helps. You laugh. It does help somehow. To soften the blow, he gives you a bruised apple. "For the walk back," he says. You thank him. The apple is sweet and a little mealy, but it tastes like something good used to happen. At the edge of town, you stumble across a WPA crew laying down bricks for a new road. There are men in denim overalls, sweat shining on their backs, whistling while they work. One of them nods at you. You nod back, like maybe tomorrow you'll be in those boots, shoveling gravel and building something that might outlive you. The foreman hands you a form. "No promises," he says, "but show up early Monday." You cradle the paper like a promise. Evening now. You stop by the community hall for a listening party. Someone's borrowed a phonograph, and they're playing swing music in the corner. The record skips every fourth beat, but no one minds. A few couples sway together, feet barely lifting, like ghosts remembering how to dance. You sit in the back, tapping your fingers against your knee. The woman beside you smells like flower and lavender. She nudges you. "Used to be a ballroom dancer," she says. "Now I lead with my bad hip." You both chuckle. Before the music ends, you offer her your hand. You sway in place, your steps careful, like walking on a frozen lake. But for a few minutes, it feels like the floor is marble, the air is champagne, and the world forgot to be sad. You walk home under a sky so wide it feels like it's trying to carry your troubles for you. A soft wind picks up. Smells like rain or maybe just tomorrow. Back in bed, you unfold the work form. There's nothing fancy, just boxes and lines and smudged ink. But to you, it looks like a key. You tuck it beneath your pillow. Not to dream on, but to remind yourself what morning might bring. The sun rises the next morning with a kind of sleepy reluctance, like even it isn't quite sure this day will be any different. But you are up before it, lacing your worn boots and sipping the last of your chicory coffee. The taste bitter, earthy, and not quite coffee, but it does the job. You've circled Monday on your calendar so many times the paper is worn thin. But it's here. WPA Registration Day. You walk the 2 miles to the work site in silence. Not because there's no one to talk to, but because there's a kind of reverence to the air. Men of every age and shape wait in line, holding their breath like they're auditioning for a second chance at life. Some wear coats with more patches than cloth. One man clutches a hammer like it's a resume. The man behind you mumbles something about digging ditches being good for the soul. You nod. He smells like tobacco and oatmeal, and he keeps whistling a song with no real melody. It sticks in your ear anyway. When your turn comes, you step forward. The clerk squints at your form, his pen hovering. "You got a trade?" he asks. You pause. "Fix things. Little things." He smirks, then shrugs. "We need that." Just like that, you're in. You're handed a canvas armband, a paper lunch token, and a place to be at dawn tomorrow. Feels official. Like someone somewhere has said, "You matter." Historians still debate whether these WPA programs were economic salvation or glorified busywork. But you don't care. All you know is you'll be moving bricks instead of waiting for bread. That afternoon, you celebrate with something decadent. A slice of buttered bread, toasted on a skillet until it crackles. The scent alone feels like indulgence. You eat slowly, letting each bite linger on your tongue. You feel rich. You feel lucky. You feel full. Your neighbor drops by, an older woman with a dog named Peanut and a fondness for complaining. But today she's smiling. She hands you a bag of old buttons. "Heard you fix things," she says. "Thought these might help." You take them like they're pearls. One is shaped like a tiny violin. Another has a sun etched into the metal. You thank her and promise to make them useful. She nods, then asks if you can repair the clasp on her coin purse. It's the first job you've had in weeks. You say yes before she finishes asking. By evening, the radio hums with music from the South. Something soft, lilting, the kind of tune that makes your shoulders sway without asking. The announcer reads a letter from a listener in Alabama who says he just wants to keep his chin up long enough to see next spring. You understand that kind of hope. It's the slow-burning kind. Not fireworks, just a single match that won't go out. You pull the girl's drawing from your pocket and pin it next to your cot. The house is still crooked. The door still too small. But there it is, chimney and all. Tonight, you fall asleep dreaming not of what you've lost, but of what you might still build. The next morning, your new job begins. You join a crew of 10. Half of them younger than you, the other half somehow older. One wears a top hat. Says he used to be a magician before the audience disappeared. Another hums church hymns while he works, his rhythm guided by memory and hope. Your job is to help reinforce a crumbling footbridge near the school. The wood groans under every footstep, like it's tired of carrying people's weight. You learn to measure planks, saw straight, hammer slow. Your hands swell and blister. You bleed a little, but it's the kind of ache that makes you proud. At lunch, you sit with the humming man, the magician, and a teenager named Earl who swears he saw a UFO over the wheat fields last fall. You tell him it was probably just the moon playing tricks. He shrugs. Still cool, though. They share their lunches, a boiled egg here, half a sandwich there. You offer half your apple and a piece of jerky someone traded you for a mended belt. For dessert, you trade stories. One man says he once danced with a woman who wore gloves made of spider silk. Another claims he met a silent film star in a train station, and she kissed his cheek for luck. You tell them about the buttons, the girl with the chimney house, the quiet gift of a door. They listen. They nod. Someone says, "That's real nice." You work until the sun slinks away, your body aching in unfamiliar but honest ways. When you head home, the air smells like wood smoke and the promise of rain. The clouds hang low, lazy and thick. You don't even mind. At your door, you find a package wrapped in newspaper. Inside, 3 more broken things, buttons, a cracked teacup, a loose watch chain. No note, just faith that you'll know what to do. You place them gently on the shelf and think to yourself, fixing small things might just be the biggest work of all. Morning again. The sky is the color of dishwater and the clouds drag their feet across it like they, too, are just trying to get through another day. You rub your sore hands, now rough and reliable, and lace up your boots. They're still held together by the same patch of string and prayer. Yet somehow they feel sturdier now. Out on the WPA site, it's quieter than usual. The humming man is out sick, and the magician wears his hat low over his eyes. The teenager Earl is chipper, though, talking about a new government mural going up near the library. He says it's got giant hands holding wheat stalks, and a baby smiling in the corner. You chuckle, sounds like propaganda, but at least it's pretty. Your job today is clearing debris behind an old courthouse. The sun doesn't shine there, it just sort of hovers like it's considering moving on. You dig through bricks and ash, pulling out anything that might still serve a purpose. Mostly it's twisted nails and fragments of stone. But then you find a doorknob, smooth brass, still warm from the sun, with a floral swirl etched on its surface. You slip it into your pocket like a treasure. They say these federal projects were just stopgaps, patches for a sinking boat. Historians argue whether they did more to boost morale or employment stats. But when your hands are busy, your mind doesn't wander as far. Sometimes survival is about rhythm, not reason. At lunch, someone passes around a stack of old newspapers used to wrap food. The headlines are all doom. Banks collapsing, storms flattening farms, senators yelling into nothing. But one story catches your eye. Orchestra plays to empty hall for fifth straight night. You imagine it. Musicians in tuxedos, violins echoing into silence, playing for no one but hope itself. That night, you can't stop thinking about those musicians, how they showed up, bowed, and gave their best to an empty room. You wonder what kept them coming back. Maybe it's the same thing pulling you back to this bridge, day after day. Not the pay, not even the purpose, just the quiet insistence that showing up matters. When you return home, a neighborhood kid is waiting on your porch, holding something behind his back. "My mom says you fix stuff," he mumbles, then reveals a toy train missing its wheels. You nod, kneel, and accept it with solemnity. He watches you like you're a doctor about to perform delicate surgery. You tell him it'll take a couple days, maybe longer, but he grins anyway. Before he leaves, he hands you something else. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich, wrapped in wax paper. "Mom said you might need lunch tomorrow." You do. Later, by lamplight, you take out your growing pile of things to fix. The buttons, the cracked cup, the train, the doorknob. It's like a museum of the almost lost. And then there's the girl's drawing, now taped to the wall beside your cot. She's added to it. There's a dog now peeking out the window. And beside the house, a person, you maybe with one hand resting on the crooked doorframe. Your home might still creak. Your walls might still shiver in the wind. But here, taped to your wall, is a version of life that makes space for joy. You fall asleep that night with the tune of the radio orchestra humming in your head, and the imagined applause of invisible audiences echoing in your chest. The next morning, you're assigned to the mural project. Does not paint you're trusted with, you're no artist, but they need scaffolding, and that's something you can build. You arrive early, and the mural is already halfway done. A woman with her hair pinned up and a paintbrush tucked behind her ear stands on a ladder, muttering about proportion and too much blue. She glances at you. "Can you hold that steady?" she asks, pointing at a plank. You do. All day you steady ladders, pass buckets, sweep the dust of dreams. The mural stretches across the entire wall. Scenes of workers planting, children reading, hands outstretched. Not begging, but building. "People say it's corny," she shrugs. "But if I'm going to be broke, I'd rather be broke with a view." She asks your name. You tell her. She writes it in tiny letters under the lowest stalk of wheat, hidden, but there. "Everyone who helps gets remembered," she says. You walk home that night with paint on your shirt and the faint smell of turpentine in your nose. The streetlights flicker like they're trying their best, too. Inside, the train is fixed. The wheels borrowed from an old button assembly. It's not perfect, but it moves, and for a toy, that's enough. You wonder what tomorrow brings. Maybe more scaffolding. Maybe more broken things to mend. Or maybe, just maybe, a finished mural, a grinning kid, and the echo of music playing for an audience made of hope. The mural is finished. Well, almost. There's one corner that still glares white and blank, waiting for its final brushstroke. The artist, her name's Evelyn, you've learned, stands back with her arms crossed, chewing the end of a paintbrush like it's a stick of gum. She's trying to decide what belongs there. You offer a quiet suggestion. What about a porch, with someone sitting on it, just watching? She doesn't say anything, but the next morning, there it is. A small, painted porch. A man in shadow, seated with a book in his lap, legs stretched out like he's in no rush to be anywhere else. You pretend not to notice. She pretends not to smile. The next few weeks settle into something like comfort. You still work for your wages, scraping, stacking, sweeping, but now you have things to look forward to. The mural, Evelyn's muttering, the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from the neighbor kid, whose toy train now chugs happily in and out of puddles. And sometimes, when the sky looks like brushed cotton and the wind smells like dirt warmed by the sun, you walk a little slower. You let yourself feel the moment instead of just surviving it. Historians still argue whether the New Deal was a salvation or a sop, whether Roosevelt gave the country a ladder or just a polished illusion of one. But you just know the days feel more bearable when they're filled with rhythm, color, and someone remembering your name. One morning, Evelyn isn't at the mural site. Instead, there's a note taped to the scaffold. Off to paint something bigger. Thank you for holding things steady. Don't forget, you belong in the picture. You run your hand over the ink, then the wall, then your own chest, trying to anchor that sentence somewhere soft. That night, you eat stew with the old magician from the work crew. He's retired from card tricks and now keeps bees in a backyard hive. He shows you a jar of honey. Tastes like dust and daisies, he says, but in a good way. You trade him a handful of bent nails and 2 buttons for it. He laughs, tells you you're terrible at bartering, then gives you a second jar. Just in case the first one makes you greedy. Back at your place, you find a surprise on your doorstep. The neighbor kid again, this time with his older sister, who's holding a puppy wrapped in a blanket. She said you used to have a dog, he explains. You did, long ago, a mutt with one ear that wouldn't stand up. This one's no different, patchy, wiry, and already chewing your shoelace. He needs a name, the girl says. We were thinking Lucky. You look at the puppy, then at her. No, you reply. Name him Roosevelt. They both laugh. The boy adds, that way he'll save the day. That night, you sit on your stoop, Roosevelt asleep at your feet, the scent of honey in the air, and you hear music drifting in from someone's radio 2 doors down. It's not an orchestra this time. It's a lone trumpet playing a tune you don't recognize but instantly love. The mural is done. Your hands still ache. The money still isn't enough. But your home has light now, soft, slow, earned light. One day, someone from the local paper stops you on the street. We're doing a story on WPA workers, she says. Mind answering a few questions? You shrug. Sure, as long as I don't have to smile. She asks what you do. Build things, you answer. She asks what you're proud of. You think for a long time. Then you say, I kept a ladder steady that let someone else reach the sky. She looks at you like she doesn't quite get it. That's fine. You don't need applause. You just need mornings with meaning. And if a day comes when there's no mural, no magic bees, no sandwiches or paintbrushes or broken trains to mend, you'll still have this, a porch with a view, a puppy named Roosevelt, and the quiet knowledge that even in an era of dust and despair, you held your corner of the world together with soft hands, stubborn kindness, and a little honey on the side. You wake up before sunrise now. Not out of necessity, your shifts are irregular, but because the silence before the city stirs feels like something sacred. The air is cooler than almost crisp, like it belongs to the past. You sit by the window with Roosevelt curled at your feet and sip the instant coffee you bartered off a traveling preacher in exchange for fixing a squeaky bicycle wheel. Across the alley, laundry lines sag with patched overalls and dresses sewn from old feed sacks. The sky above them turns lavender. You hear someone playing the harmonica in the tenement below. Not a song, just breath and metal and memory. You still keep busy. Some days it's sweeping schoolhouses or painting signs. Other days, it's cataloging dusty library books for a WPA literacy program that claims to combat the creeping ignorance of economic despair. A dramatic mission, sure, but it comes with a quiet reading room and a thermos of weak tea, so you're not complaining. Your favorite task, though, comes on Wednesdays, documenting oral histories from old Civil War veterans at the local lodge. Most of them ramble. One insists he saw Lincoln shave. Another swears he once rode a horse backward through Richmond. You believe about half of what they say, but you write it all down anyway because maybe truth isn't the point. Maybe these stories, absurd or not, are just lighthouses for lost time. Historians still argue whether these interviews actually preserved national memory or simply offered busywork for restless minds. But to you, they feel like letters addressed to the future, proof that someone somewhere tried to remember. On your way home, you pass a newsboy shouting headlines you can't afford to read. The world outside still wrestles with bank closures, droughts, strikes, and dust storms so thick they blot out the sun. But inside your own quiet orbit, things have slowed. Once, a wealthy woman visiting the mural had sniffed, "These programs are just charity with prettier paint." You'd bitten your tongue. Now, months later, you think you might have a better answer for her. "Ma'am," you would say, "this isn't charity, the scaffolding." And some of us are just trying to climb back to ourselves. You help an old neighbor fix her sink. In return, she knits Roosevelt a sweater that he immediately tries to chew off. You meet a man who carves chess pieces from soap and insists you play a game, though he's missing a rook and substitutes it with a thimble. You lose badly. He says, "That means you're normal." Most nights, you sit on the stoop with the chessboard between you. Sometimes the neighbor kid joins, his toy train forgotten. Sometimes Evelyn walks by on her way home from painting schoolhouses and raises an eyebrow when she sees the puppy's new scarf. "Who taught him fashion?" she teases. You shrug. "Same one who taught me patience." Roosevelt barks once, wagging his tail like he agrees. There's a slow sweetness to it all, like molasses poured in cold weather. And maybe that's the secret the Depression never wanted to admit. Not everything of value is tied to money. You can't coin a sunrise, or bottle the sound of someone humming while they stir soup for 3. You can't monetize the relief in someone's eyes when they say, "You showed up. That's more than most." One day, you receive a letter, your first in ages. It's from your sister out west. She heard you were still working through the WPA and wanted to check in. She writes, "I know it's hard. We're all just hanging on. But I'm proud of you. You didn't vanish." Folded in the envelope is a pressed flower, wild lupin, faded violet and thin as a whisper. You tape it to your mirror. You don't write back right away. You let the silence stretch a little longer, like the space after a sigh. Weeks later, you find a photograph tucked in an old book at the library. A family in front of a tar paper shack. For kids, 2 chickens, and a radio perched on a stump. Everyone's smiling. The caption reads, "Hope survives on whatever it's given." You leave the photo there for the next reader. That night, the harmonica plays again below your window. Roosevelt snores. You close your eyes and wonder what the country will look like 50 years from now. Whether anyone will remember this era as more than just soup lines and dust. Maybe they'll remember the kindness, the music, the murals. Maybe they'll remember you. Some mornings you forget what day it is. Not in a foggy, hopeless way, but in the soft, unhurried rhythm of someone who's learned not to measure time by clocks. Your life these days is marked by smaller rituals. When the bread line forms on 3rd Street, when the WPA supply truck sputters in around noon, when Roosevelt noses your arm because he knows it's time for your walk. This morning, you're heading to an abandoned train depot. It's been converted into a community sewing hall. Rows of humming machines, fabric scraps in 100 patterns, and women talking in low, tired voices as their feet tap the pedals below. Some of the men help too, patching work clothes or folding blankets for the Red Cross. You've been tasked with mending uniforms for a traveling theater troupe funded by the Federal Theater Project, another one of Roosevelt's alphabet soup initiatives. They're staging a mobile version of Macbeth, believe it or not, with a cardboard castle and a milk crate throne. One of the actresses tells you she used to be on Broadway. You don't know if it's true. She's got lipstick made from crushed beetroot and a voice that makes you sit straighter, like you're under stage lights yourself. You watch them rehearse during lunch break. Banquo forgets his lines. Lady Macbeth laughs too hard. The fake dagger keeps falling out of Macbeth's belt. It's perfect. Historians still argue whether the Federal Theater Project served real cultural value or just offered temporary escape. But escape, you're realizing, is sometimes necessary. Even a few moments inside a story can hold you together better than bread. After rehearsal, you find a small flyer tucked into your coat pocket. Tonight, shadow puppets and sweet tea. Bring a blanket. Courtyard behind the Methodist church. You show up because why not? The courtyard is strung with wires holding old bed sheets. A flickering oil lamp behind them casting shaky silhouettes of birds, dragons, and little stick-legged people on the makeshift screen. A teenager narrates with dramatic flair as the audience. Mostly children and their grandparents. Giggles and sips tea. You sit beside Evelyn, who hands you a sugar cube wrapped in newspaper. For luck, she says. You pocket it. Later, you'll feed it to Roosevelt, who seems to believe he's earned it just by existing. Somewhere in the night sky above, a plane glides past. Its rumble distant but steady. You imagine a pilot staring down, wondering why there's light in a church courtyard in a broke city on a Wednesday night. If he knew what was happening down here, you think he might smile. You walk home with your hands deep in your coat pockets, your ears full of laughter and puppet stories. A man sweeping the sidewalk nods as you pass. Someone's frying onions a few buildings down. A stray cat watches you from a fire escape, regal and still. On your stoop, you find a small note stuck under your door. The mural's drying. Meet at dawn. Bring tea. It's from the art students again. You'd nearly forgotten. So, you boil water on your old camping stove, pour the tea into mismatched jars, and get some stale biscuits from your bread stash. Roosevelt senses something special's coming. He doesn't bark, just watches. You walk under stars that fade to blue. The mural, remember the one from weeks ago, has transformed. What began as dull sketches now glows in the morning light. There's a man hoisting a child onto his shoulders, a woman reading under a tree, a whole crowd painted into the brickwork as if emerging from it. And at the far end, just barely visible in the curve of the wall, is a little dog with a bright red scarf. Thought we'd add someone who never missed a shift, Evelyn says. You shake your head, trying not to grin too hard. Someone passes you a biscuit. The tea is lukewarm. Truck rattles by without honking. For a moment, you could swear the mural breathed. It's just paint. You know that. But still, you head back home as the city starts to stir. Another workday ahead, though who knows what kind of work. You might help set up an agricultural fair, or collect tin cans for reuse. Or maybe it'll just be sweeping again, your old friend, the broom. Either way, you'll show up. That's been the secret all along. People think surviving is about clutching to whatever scraps you can grab. But maybe, just maybe, it's about continuing to offer something. A stitch, a smile, a brush stroke, a shadow puppet dragon. You open the door, Roosevelt scrambles in ahead, and you both collapse on the creaky couch. The harmonica player downstairs is tuning up again. Or maybe just making sure you don't forget how stories sound when they're sung, not shouted. You close your eyes. You're not rich. You're not famous. But you are alive. The sun leaks orange light through the cracked blinds of your tiny apartment, spilling over stacks of newspapers and the threadbare armchair you've had since the 1920s. Roosevelt stretches beside you, the slow blink of his old eyes mirroring your own weariness. Outside, the city murmurs its usual morning soundtrack. Distant streetcars, a child's laughter, the clink of bottles in an alley. Today, You're headed to the local library. Not for books exactly, though the scent of aging paper and wood polish already soothes you, but because the library has become an unlikely hub of hope. The Works Progress Administration has sent in volunteers to teach adults how to read and write, a modest but persistent effort against the crushing tides of illiteracy that the Depression has worsened. You remember when reading was effortless, a joy of childhood summers under shady trees. Now, it's a lifeline, a small rebellion against the invisible forces that keep you down. The librarian, Mrs. Carmichael, greets you with a warm smile, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. She's one of the few bright spots around, always humming a tune that sounds like a lullaby for broken dreams. Today's lesson is on reading maps. Maps, she explains gently, are stories of journeys, paths taken, and futures imagined. She hands you a tattered map of the Dust Bowl migration routes, ink faded and creased from so many hands. You trace the dusty trails with your finger, imagining families packed into rattling trucks, children clutching worn dolls, all chasing the promise of California sunshine and work. Historians still argue whether the migration truly changed America's cultural landscape or simply scattered despair over new fields. But for you, it's a tale of resilience. Later, you join a group session where someone is reading aloud from a local newspaper, news about new public health campaigns, hints of Roosevelt's next moves, small business openings, and a story about a man who built a homemade windmill to power his home. The story of the windmill makes you smile. It's the kind of ingenuity that flourished quietly in these years. People crafting tools and hope from scrap wood and metal. You've even heard of a woman in Arkansas who built a still to make homemade ice cream, just to give children a taste of sweetness during hard times. As the lesson ends, Mrs. Carmichael offers you a pamphlet titled Gardening for Nutrition in Small Spaces. Victory gardens, she says, are a way to reclaim some control over what you eat. Outside, you run into Joe, a man who used to work in the steel mills before the crash. He's planting tomatoes in his window box, his hands thick and rough but gentle as he tends the fragile seedlings. Got to keep something growing, Joe says, half joking but mostly serious. If the world's falling apart, at least we've got a little green. You nod, feeling the dirt under your fingernails as you help him plant a row of beans. On the way home, you stop at a storefront where a jazz trio is setting up. The trumpeter winks at you and plays a soft tune that seems to echo the rhythm of the city. Uneven, hopeful, a little worn but not broken. It's not the wealth or fame you dreamed of in your youth. It's something quieter, steadier. A patchwork of small joys stitched into the fabric of hard times. You get home just as the evening sun fades, Roosevelt curling up at your feet. Tomorrow, there'll be more stories, more struggles, and more reasons to hold on. But tonight, the music and the plants and the words you learned are enough. You wake up the next morning to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft, uncertain, like someone tiptoeing through memory. It's Mrs. Whitaker from down the hall. She's carrying a bundle of dresses, all hand-stitched, and invites you to join her at the church basement for a barter market. Money may be tight, she says with a shrug, but a good apron's still worth a loaf of bread. The barter market is one of those strange but lovely inventions of the Depression, part necessity, part social event, entirely stitched together by community ingenuity. Inside the basement, it smells like cornbread, mothballs, and something vaguely medicinal. Tables line the room, each one piled with goods. Canned beans, homemade soap, old boots, patched-up overalls, knitted mittens, jars of pickled turnips. You offer up a small pile of booklets you copied by hand, a WPA project full of recipes that stretch flour and imagination. A woman trades you a jar of apple butter for one. A boy trades you a bundle of firewood for two. Across the room, a sign reads, "Dance at 6 o'clock. Bring a smile, not a nickel." You can't help but chuckle. Somewhere between despair and dust, people are still finding ways to celebrate. The Depression didn't just take away jobs or homes, it rearranged social rules. Suddenly, barbers became butchers on weekends. School teachers knitted blankets to trade for eggs. Former bankers polished shoes for a meal. Historians still debate whether this collapse in class distinctions lasted beyond the decade, but for now, everyone is simply human. You spot a familiar face, Clarence, the old cobbler. He hasn't been seen much lately. Word was he lost a son to illness. Today he's offering shoe repairs in exchange for soup ingredients. You offer your help, and he hands you a pair of battered brogues that need a new sole. Leather's hard to find, he says softly. So now I use canvas from mail sacks. Walks fine if you don't run. As you stitch side by side, he tells you stories from the First World War, how trench boots once fell apart in the mud, and how socks became more valuable than bullets. It's not exactly bedtime conversation, but it's told in a way that settles the heart instead of stirring it. A child approaches, Gracie, maybe 7 or 8, with big eyes and a lopsided bow. She's offering a drawing of a flower in exchange for something pretty. You give her one of Mrs. Whitaker's embroidered handkerchiefs, and she beams like you just handed her the moon. By late afternoon, the basement is humming. Someone plays a fiddle. Someone else claps along with a washboard. Laughter echoes off the walls like a gentle protest against despair. You sit with a plate of cornbread and lentil stew, the flavors earthy and oddly comforting. A woman across the table asks where you're from. You tell her. She nods. We all came from somewhere. What matters is we're still here. The sun starts to dip low, casting golden stripes through the church windows. You stay for the dance. Not much more than shuffling feet and slow turns, but it feels like a heartbeat in motion. Roosevelt is waiting when you return home, paws twitching in a dream. You light a small candle, lean back in your chair, and listen to the creaks of the building settling into night. Outside, a harmonica plays from someone's windowsill, a slow, sweet tune about loss and longing. It occurs to you then, maybe we didn't survive the Depression with money or power, but with connection, with soft skills, with shared soups and traded buttons and fiddle songs echoing under church rafters. You pull a threadbare quilt over your knees, let your eyes drift toward the candlelight, and breathe in the soft hush of another day endured, another day shared. The next morning, it's your turn to help with the community soup kitchen. Not as a guest, but as a helper. You roll up your sleeves, tie on an apron that still smells faintly of onions and soap, and step behind the long table where pots bubble and steam with something close to hope. The menu? Whatever people donated, navy beans, turnips, barley, the occasional chunk of salt pork like treasure in a sea of starch. You stir gently, not wanting to disturb the flavor or the mood. The kitchen hums like a quiet engine of survival. Children line up with tin cups, older folks with careful eyes scan for seconds, and people who once wore neckties now count crackers like currency. But no one complains. In fact, you hear more thank yous in this hour than you did in the last year. Across from you, a woman named Pearl serves bread she baked in a wood-fired stove. She tells you she used to teach Latin in Boston, but now she teaches yeast to rise in cold kitchens. It's all language, she says with a wink, just different verbs. A man named Ellis ladles stew and hums jazz under his breath. He once played clarinet in Chicago. Still got my horn, he tells you. Just waiting for a gig that pays in meat, not applause. Historians often paint the Depression as a period of stagnation. Economies collapsing, factories shuttered, dreams deferred. But here, behind the ladles and loaves, you feel something moving. Adaptation, improvisation, 1,000 invisible acts of reinvention. Out back, you haul water from a well that's gone a little murky. A group of teenagers has turned the chore into a competition. Who can fill the most buckets without spilling a drop? They laugh like there's no crisis. It's both heartbreaking and beautiful. Inside again, a tiny drama unfolds. One boy refuses to eat, says he's not hungry. His sister, maybe 12, keeps nudging the bowl toward him. You sit with them, no big speech, just sit, slowly breaking a roll of bread, tearing it into smaller and smaller pieces until he takes one. Sometimes survival is a spoonful. Sometimes it's eye contact. Later, during cleanup, someone drops a ladle and the clang startles everyone. For a moment, silence settles like ash. Then Pearl says, "Well, the ladle's awake," and laughter bursts like a dam giving way. Afterward, you help pack leftovers into tin containers, each labeled with a scrap of paper. For Mrs. Linden, for the Jackson twins, for the blind man on Fifth. You deliver them one by one, knocking softly, leaving the warmth of soup like a message. You're not forgotten. Outside, snow begins to fall. Just a flurry, but enough to hush the streets. You think about all the homes tonight with empty cupboards but full hearts. The phrase sounds cheesy, but here, it's the truth. You pass by a boarded-up factory, its rusted sign barely legible. Once it roared with machines. Now it shelters stray cats and echoes. Some say these places will never reopen. Others insist the country is just bending, not breaking. Historians still argue whether this era built resilience or trauma, or both. On the way home, you see Clarence again. He's sitting on a crate, fixing the heel of a boot with dental floss and glue made from flour and water. "Not perfect," he grins. "But neither am I." You smile. In this world, perfection is overrated. Mending matters more. That night, Roosevelt curls up at your feet, his snoring soft and rhythmic. You read an old magazine by candlelight, an article about California, how some are heading west, chasing sunshine and citrus jobs that may or may not exist. Sounds tempting, but far. Instead, you fold your hands behind your head and listen to the creak of the floorboards, the wind pressing against the windows, the whisper of another day stitched together with kindness and broth. You wake to a knock, not the urgent kind that brings bad news, just the friendly tap-tap of someone holding a purpose. You shuffle to the door in your worn socks, open it, and find a boy, maybe 16, standing with a canvas bag full of newspapers. He offers you one with a grin. "Extra, extra." Dust storm hits Kansas again. You glance at the headline. The photo is nearly black with grit. Another town swallowed by wind and silence. You trade the boy a biscuit for the paper and thank him, both of you pretending it's a fair deal. You settle by the stove, scanning the headlines. Banks faltering, wheat prices plummeting, a report on unemployment, and buried in the back, a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt about dignity and duty. You read it twice. Outside, a neighbor is stringing laundry across a rope tied between two skeleton trees. The wind lifts a dress like it remembers dancing. You decide to help out at the local community school. It's not officially a school anymore. The funding dried up 2 years ago, but it's a place where kids gather and older folks teach them whatever they remember, a kind of memory co-op. You arrive just in time for Tuesday skills. Today's lesson is mending socks, taught by a woman named Nora who used to sew costumes for a traveling theater troupe. The trick, she tells the kids, is to patch the hole without losing the story in the thread. You smile at that. Your lesson is next. You're teaching basic arithmetic, but half the kids already know it better than you do. So instead, you start a game bartering math. If you have 3 apples and your neighbor has 1 chicken, how many apples get you an egg? A kid named Jojo blurts, 0. Chickens don't like apples. Another raises her hand. Depends if the apples are bruised. It turns into a full-on mock market. Chalk scratches. Giggles multiply. Someone draws a goat. At lunch, there's a surprise. Someone donated a wheel of cheese. Real cheese. The room goes quiet when it's unwrapped, as if they're witnessing a miracle in dairy. Every slice is paper-thin but savored like gold. Later that day, you visit the small library. It's barely lit, and half the books are held together with twine and hope. But there's a warmth here that electric light can't match. The librarian, Mr. Fennell, reads aloud in a voice like molasses and thunder. Today's story? Tom Sawyer. The kids lounge on rugs, eyes wide. Mr. Fennell pauses dramatically when Becky Thatcher appears, then leans in and says, "Now, I don't know about you, but I would have traded every marble I had for one look from her." They howl, even the shy ones. You take a turn reading, your voice softer, slower, like tiptoes through sentences. You lose yourself in the rhythm, forgetting the gray outside, the rationed books, the cracked soles of your shoes. As the sun slips lower, Mr. Fennel shows you the donation box. A wooden crate where people leave letters, poems, stories they've written. One is called A Day Without Dust. Another is a handwritten cookbook titled Things You Can Do with One Egg. There's a debate happening in the corner between two old-timers. One insists Hoover wasn't all bad. The other thinks FDR might be a magician. Historians still argue. 2. Was the New Deal salvation or illusion? Did it rescue America or merely delay the inevitable? You leave the library with a poem tucked in your coat pocket. It reads, "We don't have clocks, but the soup says noon. We don't have gold, but the laughter fills the room." Walking home, you pass a man painting a mural on the side of an old butcher shop. The scene? A family eating at a table beneath a giant sun. The faces look familiar, neighbors, children, maybe even you. He paints with ash, clay, and beet juice. Resourceful art for a resource-starved world. You offer him your last piece of chalk. "White," he says, surprised. "That's rare." You nod. Makes the shadows softer. Back home, you light a candle, sit by the window, and read the poem again. Outside, someone plays harmonica. Off-key but sweet. Maybe it's Clarence. Maybe it's someone dreaming through a melody. Roosevelt the dog lifts his head, listens, then settles back into your feet with a sigh. You swear he understands every note. And just like that, the world narrows again. To soup, chalk, paper poems, and the soft scratch of survival. You wake early, earlier than usual, not because of the light, but because of the silence. No wind, no creaking boards, no distant coughs or clatter from the neighbors. Just that kind of soft stillness that feels like the whole town is holding its breath. You step outside in your wool cardigan, breath visible in the crisp morning air. For the first time in days, the sky is blue, like actual blue, not beige or brown or dust gray. You stand there a full minute just looking up like you forgot the sky could do that. By mid-morning, everyone's out. Some are sweeping porches, others just standing there, basking. A little girl spins in place, arms out, like a sunflower that just found the sun. You head to the community center. Today's a big day. The traveling radio man is back. He's got a wind-up crank radio and a new battery, a combination that might as well be science fiction. Everyone crowds around the folding table as he tunes the dial. Static, crackle, then a voice, rich and warm. A Roosevelt fireside chat. The president's tone is calm, measured, like someone who's not trying to fix the world in a day, just trying to remind you that you matter in it. We must act and act quickly. Relief must come not as a gift, but as a job restored, a dignity rekindled. You close your eyes and listen. It's not about policy. It's about voice. About someone speaking as if they know you. Know your dog has fleas, your boots leak, your spirit frays a little more with each unanswered letter. And yet, you still show up. Afterwards, someone says, "He sounds like he believes in us." A few nods. One person claps. Quietly, because this isn't church, but maybe it kind of is. The day keeps giving. Clarence has gathered enough materials to fix the broken porch swing outside the schoolhouse. You help. It's a slow job. Wood's warped, nails are bent, but it feels good to work with your hands again. "Back when I was a boy," Clarence says, "my dad used to fix wagons with wood glue made from flour and sugar water. That stuff held tighter than church secrets." You both laugh. Inside the schoolhouse, there's a special guest today, Miss Addie, who used to be a vaudeville actress before the crash. She's doing dramatic readings of Shakespeare, mostly Twelfth Night, with voices, gestures, and the kind of flair that makes kids forget they're sitting on hard floors. "You, sir, are out of your element," she booms at one kid. "I don't know what an element is," he fires back. The whole room erupts. You lose 5 minutes to laughter. Later, during a quiet moment, someone asks her how she ended up here. "Broadway went dark, but here," she says, pointing at her chest, "the stage never leaves you." That night, you attend the monthly barter dance. Not an actual dance, though there is music. It's a kind of open floor market where people trade what they have. Potatoes for mended socks, eggs for books, a homemade quilt for a bundle of dry firewood. You bring a jar of pickled beets, which earns you 3 pencils and a nearly full notebook. Win. There's music from a guy with a banjo and a woman with spoons. The rhythm is uneven, occasionally offbeat, but there's a joy to it, a refusal to surrender. You sit with a man named Douglas. He's missing half a tooth, maybe 2, and tells you he used to build Ferris wheels. Actual Ferris wheels. Now he makes wind chimes from bottle caps. Not as thrilling, he says, but folks need music more than rides these days. He offers you a chime, a small one, strung on fishing line, clinking gently. You hang it from the window when you get home. That soft clink-clink joins the soundscape of your nights. Before bed, you crack open the notebook, feeling the weight of its empty pages. You begin to write, not a journal, not a letter, just notes, about what people do when everything seems lost, about the smell of dust and burnt toast, about how cheese can make people cry, about Roosevelt the dog's weird snore. You call the first entry, "The day the sky turned blue." There's a phrase historians use when they talk about this time, resilient scarcity. It means people made do, adapted, thrived in spite of lack. But you think it should be quiet brilliance, because there's something luminous about these days, even with their sorrow. You close the notebook, tuck it under your pillow, and sleep to the sound of bottle cap, wind chimes, and Roosevelt's gentle snore. You wake before dawn, not from dreams, but from the soft patter of rain on the tin roof. Real rain, not the spit and dust kind, not mist that vanishes before it hits the ground. This is slow, steady, promising rain, the kind that makes you want to sit by the window and just listen. The dirt road outside your cabin is already soaking, puddles forming in the dimple tracks left by boots and wheels. You step out onto the porch with your tin cup of weak coffee, steam curling from it like a ghost. It smells more like burnt bread crust than beans, but it's hot, and that's enough. Roosevelt, wet and pleased with himself, trots in carrying something large and muddy in his mouth. Someone's shoe. He looks at you proudly. You sigh and tell him to put it in the probably important pile. The rain keeps falling, and for once, people don't complain. They walk through it with coats open and faces upturned. Kids splash barefoot, yelling things like, "It's touching me," like they forgot how water worked. You find yourself walking too, aimless but not lost. Your feet carry you to the edge of the field near the old church, where the river once trickled but has long been dry. Now, there's a glimmer again, just a whisper of water returning to the earth. Someone shouts, and you see Mr. Harlan, the beekeeper, pointing at the ground. Tiny green shoots, barely longer than a fingernail, poke through the soil. After years of nothing but dust and brittle weeds, it's like seeing newborn stars. "You believe that?" he says, wiping at his eyes like the rain got inside them. You nod, but it's more than belief. The kind of ache, like your bones remember something your mind forgot, what hope feels like when it's not abstract. Later that day, there's a gathering, not planned, not formal. People just show up to the community hall, drawn by the weather and the need to be together. Miss Addie stands near the front with that dramatic posture of hers. "Today," she says, "we will make soup." No one knows what kind of soup, and it doesn't really matter. Everyone has something. A potato, a bit of carrot, a pinch of dried thyme, a suspicious-looking onion. Even Roosevelt contributes, dragging in an old bone like an offering to the gods of flavor. There's one enormous pot. Someone builds a fire under it. And then the magic happens. Not the cooking, but the stories. People swap tales while they stir. Of old towns swallowed by prairie grass. Of soda fountains and dances and the first time they kissed someone behind the grain silo. Of the worst meal they ever ate and why it still makes them smile. "Once, I made gravy from water and regret," Clarence says. The whole room laughs. Even the quiet ones talk tonight. Even you. You share the story of the first dust storm that made you cry. Not because of the dirt, but because of what it buried. Your mother's flower bed. Wild marigolds she planted even when money said she shouldn't. "Color is survival," she used to say. "By the time the soup is done, It smells like 100 memories. Good, bad, and confusingly vegetable forward. You each get one chipped bowlful. No seconds, but no one minds. It's warm. It's shared. It's enough. That evening, someone finds a violin. Half-tuned. Half-broken. Wholly magnificent. It only knows 3 songs, but they're good ones. People sway in place, sing under their breath, tap fingers against tin cups. No one wants the night to end, not really. But even joy needs rest. You walk home slowly, barefoot through damp grass. Roosevelt follows, tail wagging lazily. The clouds have thinned. Stars peek through like shy guests arriving late to the party. Inside, you light one candle, not out of necessity, but to honor the quiet. You write another note in your notebook. You don't title this one. You just write, "We didn't beat the depression. We just outlasted it. Not with money, not with might, but with soup and stories. With music made from spoons and kindness given away like spare buttons. With remembering what it means to be human when the world forgets you exist." And then the wind down begins. So now, as the candle flickers low and the edges of this story soften into memory, you take a breath, slow and quiet. You let your shoulders relax, your jaw loosen, your hands unclench. You let your mind drift back over the rain-soaked streets, the borrowed violin tunes, the way steam rose from that impossible soup like a ribbon of comfort. You remember the feel of wood beneath your fingers, the rhythm of simple labor, the hush of collective silence when the radio crackled to life. You remember how even dust can shimmer in the right light. And now that light fades. Outside, the wind carries traces of music, laughter, maybe even hope. But you're no longer following the sound. You're still, safe, tucked into that sliver of time where past and present blur. Maybe tonight you dream of marigolds blooming in a forgotten garden. Maybe you don't dream at all. Either way, you've walked through a piece of history not as a student or spectator, but as someone who lived it, who felt the cold tin of the coffee cup, the worn soles of your shoes, the joy of a good joke on a bad day. You don't need to carry the story any further. It's done enough just carrying you this far. So go ahead, close your eyes, rest, sleep. Let the depression slip away behind you like a dusty road under a full moon. And in its place, let quiet come. Let peace come. Let dreams, soft and strange, come. Hey guys, tonight we step into a world painted in sepia dust, where the land once sang with wheat, but now hums with the low moan of wind through boarded windows. You're standing in Oklahoma, 1934. A rough porch creaks beneath your boots. The sunrise is a copper smudge behind a sky already tinged with smoke-colored haze. You rub your eyes, but the air itself seems blurry. The chickens are quiet. The air has a certain heaviness, like a thought you haven't fully formed yet. There's a strange stillness, as if the prairie is holding its breath. The dogs are the first to notice. They whine low, pacing with their noses to the dirt. Today is your turn to check the well. The water's been dropping. You lift the squeaky bucket with tired arms. The water's cloudy again. You remember boiling it yesterday, trying to pretend the grit at the bottom was just tea leaves. Your neighbors said to keep a cloth over the jar, but the dust finds its way in anyway. It always does. You've got 2 windows cracked just slightly for air, but that was a mistake. This morning, your pillow was coated with a film of dust. You try not to breathe too deeply as you shake out the sheets. Everyone coughs now. Nobody talks about it much. It's just part of the house now, like the broken clock in the kitchen or the tin can catching leaks under the sink. The land used to be generous. You remember wheat, tall and golden, like it was trying to reach the sun. Now, there's only a faded memory under the crusted surface. Each morning you go out, the soil cracks a little louder underfoot. It wasn't always like this, but in just a few years, everything changed. The rain stopped. The wind didn't. The wind's picked up now. You feel it first in the back of your neck, the way it sneaks under your collar. It carries that now familiar smell of old earth being stripped bare. You glance westward. A low smudge, grayish-brown. It's nothing, probably, but the birds are flying low. And that's never a good sign. Your neighbor Earl comes by, scarf around his face like a bandit. He knocks once, brushes himself off, steps inside like he's shaking off a bad memory. Heard Kansas got hit yesterday, he says. You nod. Kansas is always a day ahead. He pulls up a chair, wipes his brow with a sleeve, leaving a smear of dust across his forehead. Didn't think we'd come to this, he mutters. Neither of you say more. He brings over some canned peaches, a rare luxury. You each take a spoonful, slow, reverent. The syrup coats your tongue like sunlight. You forget, for a second, what the air tastes like. The wind picks up again. You walk outside and look toward the horizon. That smudge is larger now.
Taller.
Rolling slowly like an animal stalking prey. You head back in, cover the windows with rags. The door creaks as you shut it. Somewhere under the floorboards, a mouse scurries. The house goes darker as the sky shifts to bronze. Then soot. The air pressure changes, you feel it in your teeth. And still, the storm doesn't fully arrive. It just looms. That's worse. In some ways, like waiting for thunder that never comes. You settle into your favorite chair, the one with the scratchy wool blanket. In your lap, a half-read Sears catalog with pages stuck together by damp fingers. You're not reading it, really. Just looking, imagining. You've learned not to expect the rain. But still, every evening you look up, just in case. You remember your father saying, "The land never betrays the patient." Maybe he was wrong. Or maybe you're just not patient enough. A baby cries next door. Earl's youngest, you think. She's always crying around this time. Dust in her lungs, they say. You close your eyes and imagine her tiny chest rising, falling, rising again. Your ears ring from the silence outside. Even the wind seems to be waiting. The ground no longer feels like earth, it's like ashes. Still warm, but lifeless. You reach for your canteen. A sip. Warm. Metallic. Still, it wets the throat. You lean back. The dust will come. It always does. But tonight you sit still beneath this creaking roof, listening to the nothing, to the quiet hum of a land forgetting what it means to grow. The dust storm hits just past midnight, but you're already awake. Not from fear stopped waking you months ago, but from the sound. It's not loud, not exactly. Just a dry hiss, like sandpaper across the roof. Then it deepens, almost like a distant engine rumbling. But you know better. That's no car. That's the sky turning upside down. You sit up slowly. The house is darker than before, if that's even possible. You wrap the wool blanket around your shoulders, shuffle to the window. Can't see a thing. It's like the outside world's been erased. Even the porch light, that weak little bulb, is swallowed whole. You press a finger to the glass and it comes away gritty. The wind is flinging earth at your walls. Tiny fists of soil thrown by invisible hands. You try not to think about what's getting through the cracks. Try not to breathe too deeply. The bedroom smells like dry salt and old pennies. You've stuffed wet towels under the doors, covered every vent with cloth. But it doesn't matter. The dust is a guest you can't keep out. It settles in your lungs like it's paying rent. Some nights you wonder if your house is shrinking. It's not, of course. But the dust makes it feel that way, closer, heavier. You sleep on the daybed now, near the stove, where the heat's best. There's no wood left for a proper fire, so you burn whatever you can find. Yesterday it was old newspaper and a broken chair leg. You glance at the wall. The old calendar from the general store still hangs there, permanently stuck on May, though you know it's probably September. Who can tell anymore? You hear the floorboards creak. Not from people. Just the house stretching under the weight of memory and grit. This place used to be whitewashed and proud, its windows thrown open to the breeze. Now the windows stay shut, and the breeze wants to kill you. Somewhere beneath the storm's roar, you hear the slow clatter of hail. No, not hail. Dirt clods, big ones, thrown like stones by the angry air. You remember when this wind was your friend, turning windmills and pushing clouds across the prairie. Now it brings only pain and erasure. Outside, nothing grows. The cornfields are graveyards of broken stalks. What few animals remain huddle in barns with rags tied over their snouts. Chickens have stopped laying. Cows cough blood. The ground has turned against you. Historians still argue whether the dust storms were purely natural or worsened by human hands, by tractors and plows carving the plains like a Thanksgiving turkey. But when you're here, in this moment, theory doesn't matter. What matters is you can't see the stars. What matters is your boots fill with dirt when you leave them by the door. The neighbors? Some already left, packed up their lives and drove west, chasing whispers of jobs in California. They say the peaches grow wild there. You've never seen a peach tree, only heard about them, round and sweet and soft as sunrise. You stay behind. Why? Maybe stubbornness, maybe hope, or maybe you just don't have gas money. You remember a time, barely, when the harvest brought music. Accordions and fiddles, kids racing through tall wheat, women cooking pies so big they needed two hands to lift. Now the only sound is the wind dragging itself across the land like an old dog with nowhere to go. You go to the cupboard and open a can of beans. They taste like metal and memory. Still, you savor each bite. There's something oddly comforting about the ritual. Heat, stir, eat slowly. Pretend you're dining in a train car headed somewhere green. You once dreamed of being a teacher or a poet. Now your words are mostly quiet ones, spoken to ghosts and wind and dry soil. But even in this, you find strange strength. There's poetry in survival. You sit back down, legs tucked under the blanket. The wind howls louder now, as if furious you haven't left, as if it's trying to sweep the past off the map. You don't argue with it. You just breathe. Shallow, careful, slow. Tomorrow you'll check the shed. Maybe there's something useful there. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. There's always something to do, even if it's just sitting still, guarding what remains. And what remains? A roof over your head, a few canned goods, a photograph of your parents on the mantel, smiling with sunburned cheeks in a time before the sky turned mean. The house shakes slightly, then stills. You hum an old tune, one your mother used to sing when the well was full and the wind smelled like rain. You can't remember all the words, but the melody is enough. Dust will settle. It always does. But tonight, in this little house that refuses to fall, so will you. Morning doesn't arrive with sunlight anymore. It arrives with silence, that odd, hollow stillness after a storm, when even the birds are too choked with dust to sing. You wake up coughing, throat like sandpaper, and reach for the enamel mug of water beside the stove. It's warm. Everything is warm except the places that are cold. Somehow they exist side by side now. You open the door a crack, just enough to see the world's latest disguise. A fresh drift of earth leans lazily against the porch, curled up like it lives there. The horizon's gone again, blotted out by brown haze, and even the barbed wire fence you put up last year has been buried to the second post. Your boots crunch as you step outside. They're heavier than they used to be, filled with old dirt and tired steps. You shield your eyes. Can't see much, but you recognize the shape of the windmill. Creaks like an old man's back. There's no water in the well. Hasn't been for weeks. But you check anyway, ritual again. One day, maybe. Your neighbor, old Roy, once tried to dig a second well by hand. He made it 20 feet before the wall caved in. Took him 2 days to claw his way out. He moved to Arizona after that. Sent you a postcard with a saguaro cactus and a joke about dustless sunsets. You keep it under a book to stop it from curling. The chicken coop door swings open on its own. The hens have scattered again, though there's nowhere to go. You walk the perimeter of your land, in name only. You can't tell what's yours anymore. Fields have turned to desert. The road's gone. Even the sky looks foreign. You remember when neighbors marked territory with stones and stumps. Now the wind reclaims it all, redrawing boundaries like a bored artist. Historians still debate whether those who stayed were brave or foolish. Maybe both. You don't mind being both. Most days, you're just tired. You find your shovel. Its handle is worn smooth, like a handshake from the past. You start clearing the steps one scoop at a time. Dust slides off like powder. It smells like baked earth and rust. The wind picks up a bit, just enough to undo your work as fast as you do it. You keep going anyway. Back inside, you boil the last 2 potatoes. One has a soft spot. You cut it away, muttering a half prayer to no one in particular. You eat them with salt, slowly, like they're sacred. Maybe they are. You think about Clara from church. She used to bake bread every Sunday, soft, fluffy loaves that made your mouth water. She moved in with her sister up north last spring. Said she couldn't stand watching the windows turn brown every day. Left you her old radio. It only picks up static now, but you still turn it on. Static is better than silence. Later, you sit in the rocker by the window, hands wrapped around an empty mug like it still holds heat. You stare at the dirt. It moves in slow waves like the sea. You'd laugh at the irony if your lips weren't so dry. Kansas, the great American ocean, just without the water. A knock comes at the door. It's not often you get visitors. You open it to find a boy. Maybe 12, maybe less. Hat pulled low, face streaked with dust. He doesn't say anything. Just holds out a sack with half a loaf of bread and a dented can of peaches. You nod. He nods back. Then he's gone. No name, no story. Just kindness, brief and unspoken. You write in your notebook that night. A few lines, not much. Your handwriting is getting shaky, but the words help. You write, "The dust may win, but not tonight. They say Roosevelt's got a plan. WPA, CCC, AAA, more letters than you can remember. You read about them in the paper before the subscription stopped. You wonder if one of those letters stands for hope. You tuck the blanket around your shoulders tighter. The wind's picking up again, sighing against the windows like it regrets its own violence. The world outside may be dying, but in here, your little lamp still glows. You close your eyes. Dream of green, of clear skies, of digging your hands into soil that doesn't fight back. By now, you don't mark the days with calendars. You mark them by wind direction, by which neighbor gave up and packed their belongings, or by how many layers of dust settle in the corner of the kitchen. Today is a northwesterly day, the worst kind. That's the direction the darkest storms come from, rolling over the plains like an army in slow motion. You try to go about your tasks. Haul a bit of water from the rain barrel, though the last storm filled it mostly with grit. You strain it through a cloth, just enough to make it tolerable. Not clean, but tolerable. You've gotten good at tolerating. The storm hits before noon, a black blizzard. That's what folks call it. Doesn't sound scientific, but it's accurate. You can't see 3 feet in front of you. You cover your mouth with a damp rag, clamp your eyes shut, and press your body against the barn door to keep it from blowing open. The wind howls like a pack of wolves that never stops running. Inside the barn, the animals moan. You whisper to them, though they can't hear you over the roar. It's more for you anyway. You stroke the goat's ears, more bone than fur now, and remember when she had a name. You've stopped naming things. Too easy to lose them. You remember when these storms first started. At first, they were strange, rare, almost exciting. Now they're frequent visitors. Unwelcome but routine. Historians still argue whether poor land management or bad luck caused the worst of it. Farmers like you didn't have the luxury of debates. You just dug and hoped. And when the storm ends, if it ends, you open the door like you're peeling back a bandage. The world outside is hushed, smothered. Fences lie flat. Drifts lean against wagons like old men asleep. The trees look like sculptures from another planet, encased in gray powder. You find a sparrow on the porch, tiny and still. You think it's dead, but then its chest moves just barely. You cup it in your hands, warm and careful, and take it inside. Set it in a shoebox with a torn sock. Maybe it'll live, maybe not, but you try. Later, you talk to the bird, whether it hears you or not. Tell it about the time your daughter made kites from flour sacks and ran barefoot across the field. Tell it about when the creek actually had frogs. Tell it you used to laugh more. Night comes with a strange silence, like the earth holding its breath. You light a candle. The power hasn't worked in weeks, but you're used to this flickering glow. It makes the walls dance. You miss dancing. You miss people who danced. You flip through a magazine someone left at the feed store. Pictures of California, green hills, smooth highways, smiling faces beneath palm trees. It's another planet, one where the sky remembers how to be blue. The Okies are headed there, in caravans of broken-down Fords, mattresses roped to the roof, kids squished in between tools and dreams. You think about joining them, but your roots are deep even if the soil is dry. There's a quote you once heard, scratched onto the wall of the schoolhouse. When you're going through hell, keep going. You don't remember who said it, but you remember the handwriting, big, looping, almost defiant. You picture that child's face, nose smudged with chalk and courage. You find your old harmonica in the drawer. Still works more or less. You play something slow. Maybe it's a hymn, maybe just a melody that feels like one. The notes hang in the air, dusty and soft. You think of your father, playing the same tune after supper. His hands were always cracked, but gentle. Outside, the wind begins again. Not angry this time, just tired, like it's blowing out its last breath before sleep. You say goodnight to the bird, to the barn, to the dirt, and to the dreams you're still not quite ready to give up. You wake before the sun, as always. The dust makes it hard to tell the hour anyway. Just varying shades of gray in the sky. The little bird from yesterday is still alive. Somehow. You offer it a few soaked breadcrumbs. Pecks weakly, and that feels like a small victory. You decide to name it Hope. Just this once. One name won't hurt. The air smells faintly of something sweet. Not flowers, those haven't bloomed in years, but maybe memory. You step outside, brush the dust from your overcoat, and head for the well. Your footsteps crunch on the crusted earth. No softness left in this ground. At the well, you see footprints. Not yours. Someone passed by early, maybe during the night. They didn't knock. People don't always do that anymore. Trust isn't what it used to be. You used to leave your doors unlocked. Now you keep a board across the back one and sleep with a shovel beside the bed. Just in case. Still, you wonder who they were. Maybe just another drifter, looking for water or a place to rest. Maybe they saw your lantern glow and didn't want to bother. You hope they found what they needed. Your neighbor, Earl, shows up around mid-morning. He brings a bundle wrapped in burlap, 2 onions, a single egg, and a slice of salt pork. A gift, or maybe a trade. You give him the last of your coffee grounds in return. Neither of you mentions how little you both have. That's part of the unspoken code now, no pity, just presence. You sit together on the porch, facing the wind. Earl pulls out a flask. You pretend not to notice. You hum while he drinks. Neither of you talks much. You've both said everything already, 100 times. When the conversation finally stirs, it's about tractors and clouds and Roosevelt. You mention the Civilian Conservation Corps. Earl grunts, says his nephew signed up. Got shipped off to plant trees in some forest far from here. At least he's eating well, Earl adds. Then he smiles, almost. Can't plant much else these days, huh? You laugh. Feels strange in your chest. Like an old song. You remember when the mail used to arrive like clockwork. Now it's hit or miss. But today there's a letter. From your cousin in Chicago. She writes about the soup lines and the newspapers as blankets and the neighbor who traded his saxophone for a sack of oats. City misery is different, but just as sharp. She encloses a clipping. A photo of Bonnie and Clyde, grinning like movie stars beside their bullet-ridden car. Folk heroes, some say. Criminals, others argue. Historians still debate whether they were rebels or just desperate kids with guns and bad luck. You shake your head. Either way, they're dead. You don't envy them. That afternoon, you help patch Earl's roof. It's just tar paper and hope stapled together. But it holds. For now, the wind picks up again. You know the drill. Drape wet sheets over the windows. Tuck towels under the doors. Herd the animals into the root cellar if you can coax them. The storm isn't as fierce this time. Just enough to coat everything in another fine layer of misery. Inside, you read an old book by lamplight. The Grapes of Wrath, borrowed from the church. The pages are dog-eared and dusty, but they speak to you. You imagine yourself as Tom Joad, fierce and weary, heart full of grit. You want to believe that someone, somewhere, is still fighting the good fight. Later, you write a few lines in your notebook. Not a diary exactly, more like breadcrumbs. A trail for someone to follow. You write, May 3rd, wind mild. Bird survived. Roof held. Good day. Then you add, Hope is still here. You close the book, check the door, and blow out the lamp. The world creaks around you, but your heart feels strangely full. You nestle into your cot and let your thoughts drift. Not to California, not to the city, but to a quiet field somewhere, where green things grow without asking. Sleep never stays long anymore. The wind has a way of whispering you awake, tugging at your dreams until they unravel into the same dry air you breathe. You sit up, slowly, joints stiff like they've turned to wood. The first light of dawn filters through the fabric you've pinned over the windows. Beige gris, like everything else. You boil water for oatmeal, if you can still call it that. It's mostly flour and imagination now. Still, it's warm. That counts. You leave a bit of it on a saucer for hope. The bird wobbles over, pecks politely as if to say thank you. Outside, the wind is quieter. Suspiciously so. That kind of calm usually means it's gathering strength somewhere, just out of sight. You've learned the rhythms. You and the wind have been roommates too long not to. You remember a time when spring meant planting. The whole community used to show up, men with shovels, women with seed sacks, children chasing each other between the rows. Music on a phonograph someone carried out onto the porch. Corn dances, tomato bets, gossip. Now, spring is just a date on a calendar no one looks at. Your neighbor's boy, Henry, comes by mid-morning. He's barefoot, hair like wheat gone wild. Maybe 7, maybe 9, you've lost count. He's holding a handful of odd buttons he found buried in the dirt. These used to be your coat? He asks. You shake your head, but smile. Might have belonged to a soldier once. Henry nods, solemn as a preacher. Then I'll give them a burial, he says, and runs off to do just that. Kids in the Dust Bowl know how to invent their own meaning. You pass the time repairing a torn curtain. Every stitch is an argument against giving up. The cloth is thin, but you double it over. That's all you can do. Layer what you have and hope it holds. Around noon, you head into town. It's a long walk, and the wind has picked up again, carrying sand like tiny needles. You wrap a scarf around your face and press forward. The streets are mostly empty, except for the occasional Model A with wooden tires or a mule cart rattling along like a skeleton on wheels. At the general store, you see Miss Adler. She used to teach music before the piano was sold to pay for her brother's medicine. Now she sells embroidery hoops and homemade soap. She gives you 2 candles and says, "Trade me next week. Sugar, when your hens start laying again." You agree, knowing full well the hens may never lay again. Still, it feels good to promise something. There's a bulletin board out front, plastered with faded posters. One announces a talk from an agricultural agent about dry farming. Another invites you to join a singing circle for morale. The ink has run, but someone added a drawing of a smiling sun. You pin a scrap of cloth beside it that says simply, "Still here." You stop at the church on the way home. Not for a sermon, there isn't one today, but for the coolness of the stone and the quiet. A single candle burns near the altar. You sit for a while and try to remember the words to an old hymn. Something about peace like a river. It escapes you, but the feeling remains. Back at the homestead, the dust has settled into a thin crust across the porch. You sweep it into patterns, swirls, spirals, a crude daisy. Art if no one looks too closely. You think about the WPA murals you read about in the newspaper, the ones going up in post offices and schoolhouses all over the country. One artist painted a woman in overalls, planting hope with her bare hands. You wonder what color he used for dust. That night, you read a letter from your cousin's husband. He's been laid off from the Ford factory and is now building wooden toys in exchange for bread. "We barter smiles now," he writes. "One grin for 2 handshakes and a wink." You close your eyes and try to imagine a world built on that kind of currency. It doesn't seem worse than the one you're in. As sleep comes, you press a button into your palm. One of Henry's treasures. Smooth and cool and real. You wake up with dust in your ears and the taste of copper in your mouth. The wind didn't howl last night, which should feel like a gift, but the silence has its own weight. It's the kind that makes you wonder what it's planning next. Breakfast is a biscuit made from whatever's left of the flour sack. You ration it with care, half today, half tomorrow, and the last crumbs for hope. She seems slower now, feathers puffed too wide. You murmur a prayer without using the word God, just in case he's tired of hearing about birds and bread. Today's the day you go help the Phillips family. Their well's gone dry and you've got a hand pump that sometimes cooperates. That's enough to qualify you as a neighborly miracle worker. You pack your tools and some canned beans and set out just as the sky starts to smear with light. The road there is cracked, a spine of the earth itself. You dodge tumbleweeds the size of children. Every so often, you spot something half-buried. A broken chair leg, a crushed harmonica, a belt buckle green with rust. This land is a graveyard of useful things. When you arrive, Mrs. Phillips gives you a hug like it might fall apart halfway through. Her eyes are red, but not from crying. It's just the wind again. You both pretend that's all it is. The kids are outside, digging trenches to divert what little rain might come. They're calling it the Grand Canal. One of them salutes you and says, "Engineer!" You salute back and tell them, "We'll name it after you when it floods." They laugh. It's a rare sound these days, like the clink of a full jar or the opening note of a remembered tune. You get to work on the pump, hands shaking more than usual. The bolts are rusted and the wood is warped. You talk to it like an old friend who's turned a bit stubborn. "Come on now. Don't make a fool of me in front of the children." After half an hour of cursing under your breath and applying some well-placed kicks, the handle groans. Then it sputters. Then, miracle of miracles, it spits out a muddy ribbon of water. The kids cheer. One of them runs to fetch a tin cup. They don't even flinch at the grit in the drink. Historians still argue whether those early Dust Bowl pumps were ever really effective. You mutter to yourself, but today this one works. That's all the history you need. You share lunch with the Phillips family. Your beans, their last onion, and 3 crackers from a tin with a faded circus elephant on the side. It's the best meal you've had in weeks. Mrs. Phillips asks if you've heard from the government. You nod vaguely. Truth is, you filled out the form for aid 3 months ago. Maybe it got lost. Or maybe you're just a speck on someone's desk in Washington. The New Deal may be real, but it's taking its sweet time getting here. She sighs and mentions that her cousin's family left last week, headed for California. Said they heard there's work picking fruit. You raise an eyebrow. In Eden, maybe. She smiles weakly. Well, it's greener than this. You leave before dusk, the wind beginning its late-day grumble. On the walk back, you find a rag doll pinned against a fence post by a stray nail. Its button eyes are mismatched, but it's intact. You dust it off, pat its yarn hair, and carry it home. It feels wrong to leave something so stubborn behind. You arrive just in time to cover the windows before the sky goes full bronze. A dust storm is rolling in, low and angry, like a giant exhaling rage. You secure the door and grab a wet rag to breathe through. The house groans under the pressure, the same way people do when they've been too quiet for too long. Inside, you light one of Miss Adler's candles. The flame dances nervously, then steadies. You place the rag doll on the table next to it. Hope, the bird, hops over and examines it like an art critic. You settle into your chair and watch the light bend around the dust, forming halos in the air. The storm slaps the house, as if demanding attention. You don't give it the satisfaction. Instead, you pick up the harmonica you found weeks ago. It barely works, but you manage a soft, wheezy lullaby. Not quite a melody, more like the echo of one. You think about the Phillips kids and their Grand Canal. You think about California and fruit and laughter. You think about what it takes to believe in any of it. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, you hum. You wake the next morning with dust in your eyelashes and a sore throat that tastes like ash. The house is quiet again, but this time it's a bad kind of quiet. The storm has moved on, but not without leaving its signature. Silt in the corners, a layer of fine grit on the table, and that eerie stillness that only follows a scolding from the sky. You open the door slowly, pushing against a drift of earth that's crept inside like an unwanted guest. Outside, everything looks a little off, like someone turned the contrast knob on the world down just a click. The fields are covered in a pale brown crust. The trees, what's left of them, are wearing cloaks of powder. Even the sunlight feels ashamed, filtering through as if it doesn't want to be caught witnessing this. You take your first steps into the aftermath, boots crunching against the hardened soil. The rag doll you rescued yesterday is still on the table inside, but Hope the bird has decided it belongs in her nest. You let her have it. Some things you just don't argue with. You spend the morning digging out the front path. Not because you need to, but because it gives your hands something to do while your mind wanders. You think about the Phillips family and their well. You wonder if they weathered the storm as safely as you did. You want to believe they did. That kind of hope is a currency around here. The radio crackles to life briefly, and you catch the end of a voice. Something about President Roosevelt, new programs, aid on the way. Historians still argue whether the New Deal reached rural families soon enough to make a real difference, but you don't need historians to tell you what your stomach already knows. Promises are easier to distribute than bread. By midday, you're headed into town. You need supplies or maybe just to see other faces. There's something about dust that makes loneliness feel louder. The road is worse than ever. Each step is like walking on old paper. Cars pass less often now. The ones that do are usually overloaded. Chairs strapped to roofs, mattresses tied with rope, and kids hanging out the back windows like dogs sniffing for a better life. At the edge of town, you pass what used to be a schoolhouse. The windows are boarded, the paint's long gone, but someone scrawled a message on the front door in charcoal. Still learning. It makes you smile. Not because it's funny, because it's stubborn. Same as you. The general store is a sad sight. Shelves half-stocked, prices quietly climbing. You buy what you can afford. A can of milk, 2 candles, and a tin of tobacco. The shopkeeper nods solemnly. He's been keeping track of your tabs and pencil, erasing less often now. On the way out, you run into Mabel Carrington, town librarian and unofficial historian. She's carrying a stack of books tied with string. "I've decided to loan them out door to door," she says. "Books shouldn't gather dust, even if we do." She offers you one, Wuthering Heights. "A bit dramatic," she shrugs. "But the wind seems fitting, don't you think?" You take it because saying no to Mabel is like insulting poetry. She adds, "There's a poetry reading tonight, at the old barn. Bring your bird if she's cultured." That night, you walk to the barn under a sky full of ash-gray stars. Hope perches on your shoulder, fluffier than usual. The barn is dimly lit, lanterns swaying with the breeze that still hasn't gotten the memo it's unwelcome. Inside, maybe 20 people have gathered, faces gaunt but eyes alert. Someone's playing a fiddle quietly in the corner, and a girl named Ruth reads a poem she wrote about the wind being jealous of trees. You take a turn too, not with a poem, but with a passage from Wuthering Heights. Your voice cracks halfway through, but no one minds. The sound of words, any words, feels sacred in this space, like firelight for the soul. Historians still debate whether community gatherings like this did more to preserve sanity or simply delay despair. You know this much. Tonight, for a few stolen hours, the barn is warm, the air is soft, and the wind seems like a forgotten character in someone else's story. Afterward, you walk home slower than usual. The road is still dust, but your steps feel lighter. You think about Ruth's jealous wind and Mabel's fierce determination. You think maybe the land isn't the only thing full of stories. Back at the house, Hope has decided the rag doll now requires a name. You go with Emily, after the Bronte sister you never understood but always respected. You place the book beside the candle and lie back in your creaky bed. Outside, the wind breathes, but it doesn't shout. Not tonight. You close your eyes and whisper a thank you. Not to God, not even to Roosevelt, but to the girl who read poetry in a barn and reminded you that even dust can be stirred into art. You wake to a sunrise that looks almost honest.
No hash, no angry sky.
Just a golden line slicing through the eastern horizon like a promise whispered too softly. Hope rustles in her nest, wings tucked under her, dreaming perhaps of breadcrumbs and wide-open skies. You can't blame her. You've been dreaming of that too. The house feels lighter this morning. Maybe it's the absence of wind, or maybe it's the memory of the poetry reading still warming the air. Either way, you move a little easier as you step outside, brushing away the last trace of silt from the doorknob. You make your way to the chicken coop, where the hens regard you with mild suspicion. 1 egg today. You thank them anyway. Gratitude, like dust, seems to settle in everything these days. The rest of the morning is for tending. You check the roof, patch another hole, sweep the porch again. Dust is patient, always returning, but so are you. That's a kind of victory. You walk to the fields and just stand there. Nothing's growing, not really, but you look anyway. Some folks believe if you stare long enough, the ground will remember how to be generous. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were acts of hope or quiet rebellion against despair. You're not sure there's a difference. Midday brings visitors. 2 men from the Soil Conservation Service. One in boots too clean for someone who claims to be local, the other scribbling in a notepad like your barn roof is a mathematical problem. They ask about erosion, rainfall, crop rotation. You offer coffee instead. They sit on your porch, drinking slowly, eyes scanning your sad acres. The clean-booted one tells you about contour plowing, cover crops, shelter belts, words that sound like they belong in a sermon more than on a farm. You nod politely. He means well, maybe even believes what he says. The other man, the note-taker, asks what it's like to hear the wind and not know if you'll wake up under a ceiling or under soil. You answer by pointing to Hope, still preening in her perch. They thank you, leave behind a pamphlet about federal assistance, and promise to return. You don't hold your breath. You've learned not to measure help by its volume, but by its timing. That afternoon, you walk into town again. The store's shelves look a little fuller, and there's a flyer nailed to the post outside. Farmers Meeting Church Hall, 5 p.m. Hot stew and updates. The word stew gets your attention. The word updates makes you cautious. Inside the church hall, it's a tight squeeze. Farmers, wives, kids who should be in school, all packed into wooden pews. The minister opens with a prayer that sounds more like an apology. Then the town mayor, who used to sell insurance before everything became uninsurable, talks about government aid, new planting techniques, a program called the WPA hiring men to build roads and bridges. Historians still debate whether the WPA truly changed rural life or simply offered a distraction from its collapse. But when they mention that they're paying 25 cents an hour, you feel a murmur rise like bread dough in the crowd. You volunteer. Not for the money, though it doesn't hurt, but for the rhythm. There's something healing about swinging a hammer beside another human being who knows the same dust, the same silence, the same hollow echo of dreams on pause. Your first WPA job is digging a trench for a water pipeline. The soil here has been dead for so long, it resists the shovel like it's offended. But you push through, working beside a man named Lionel who claims he used to be a pianist in Kansas City. His hands are blistered now, not graceful, but he still taps them like there's music hiding beneath the dirt. During lunch breaks, he hums ragtime songs and tells stories that might be lies but sound like gospel. You share your last piece of jerky and talk about the ragdoll Emily and the stubborn bird named Hope. Lionel thinks that's the best kind of sermon he's heard all year. Work continues for weeks. The trench grows and so does your resolve. You sleep deeper. Eat what you can. Keep your mind anchored to small joys. A sunrise that doesn't choke. A stranger who sings. A paycheck that might just buy sugar next time. One day, while walking home from the work site, you see something strange. A girl standing in the middle of the field, arms out like wings, face tilted toward the sun. She's barefoot, clothes patched in more places than not, but she looks radiant. You approach slowly. She doesn't move, just says, "Feel it." You nod, though you're not sure what it is. She continues, "There's life under all this. Just sleeping." You want to believe her. You really do. And maybe, just maybe, you do. That night, you sit on the porch and read Wuthering Heights by candlelight. Hope sleeps beside you. The stars are visible for the first time in weeks. You read aloud, voice steady, until the candle sputters. You pause, listen, wait. The wind doesn't answer. The next morning arrives on tiptoes, slipping into the house like a cautious guest. You rise slowly, muscles sore from trench digging, joints creaking like the old screen door you never did fix. But there's something softer in the air today. Less dust, less dread. You stretch on the porch as Hope flutters down from her perch and pecks at a breadcrumb you left. She's gotten used to your routines, and maybe you've gotten used to hers. The two of you share a quiet truce. She keeps showing up, and so do you. Breakfast is black coffee and a slice of dry cornbread, but you chew it like a king savoring imported pastries. Hunger teaches you reverence. So does survival. You spend the morning tending to odd chores, mending a broken chair leg, reattaching the door latch, shaking the last of the dust from a quilt that still carries your grandmother's stitching. Historians still argue whether quilting during the Dust Bowl was a necessity or an act of resistance. You figure it was both. Midday brings a sound you haven't heard in years. Laughter. A group of kids runs by your property, chasing a tin can down the road, shouting like pirates after treasure. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. You grin just watching. Later, you head into town. Trench work finished for now. You pass the same flyer-covered post, now updated with a new sign. Community dance, Friday night school gymnasium, live music. You almost laugh. Dance? In this dust-choked town? You go anyway. That evening, the gymnasium glows with lanterns and possibility. A local band, 2 fiddlers, a washboard, and 1 piano missing a few notes, fills the air with something halfway between jazz and a prayer. You stand near the door, awkward, until someone nudges your elbow. It's her, the barefoot girl from the field. She tilts her head, smiles, and says, "You came. You don't know how to dance." She doesn't care. She takes your hand and pulls you into the swirl of it all. Boots shuffling, skirts twirling, dust hanging like glitter in the light. You forget the drought, forget the trench, forget everything but the rhythm of feet on wood and laughter rising like steam from a warm pot. The music slows eventually, the dance softens, and you find yourself sitting outside the gym, catching your breath, the girl beside you tracing constellations with her finger. She says, "I think people are like seeds. You can bury them, try to forget about them, but one good rain, and they grow back stronger." You nod, and though no rain has fallen, something in you feels watered. Back home, you find a letter waiting. The envelope is smudged, the handwriting familiar. It's from your cousin in California. He writes about fruit-picking jobs, greener fields, a place called Weed Patch Camp. He says there's room for you, says you could start over. Historians still debate whether migrating west was an act of escape or renewal. You just stare at the envelope, turning it in your hands like a coin you're not ready to spend. The next day, you talk to Lionel. He's heard of Weed Patch, thinks he might try his luck too. He's tired of the silence in his house, tired of pretending the piano keys didn't break long before the dust came. You both agree to leave in 2 weeks. Sell what you can, pack what matters, say your goodbyes. The days blur. You help the girl, her name is Clara, fix the roof of her family's barn. You teach her little brother how to trap rabbits humanely. You write down the recipe for your grandmother's pickled beets and give it to a neighbor. These are small legacies, but they feel important. On your last night in town, there's a potluck. Everyone brings something. Beans, wild onions, a miracle of a peach cobbler from a can no one admits hoarding. You eat until you're full for the first time in months. Clara sings, and for a moment, the gym is cathedral silent. Her voice is raw, real. You think it could plant trees. Later, as the crowd thins, she walks you home. You stand on the porch and she takes your hand again. "Promise you won't forget this place," she says. You look around at the dust, the broken fence, the bird nest still tucked under the eave. "I won't," you say. She leans in, just enough for your foreheads to meet. Nookies. Just the gravity of shared survival. That night, you can't sleep. You listen for the wind, but it doesn't come. Instead, you hear something else. Maybe it's the land breathing again. Or maybe it's your own heart, finally believing it can beat somewhere else. You rise before the sun, the sky still wearing its sleep robe of indigo and quiet. A battered suitcase waits at the foot of your bed, filled with exactly 12 items. Some clothes, a photograph, the letter from your cousin, and a small jar of red dirt from your land. Just in case California doesn't smell like home. Lionel's truck rumbles into your driveway as promised, coughing and wheezing like an old man but still kicking. He gives you a solemn nod. "You sure?" he asks, though he knows the answer. You climb in. Clara doesn't come to wave goodbye, but you see her curtain shift. Just enough. That's enough. You pass the fields you once tilled, the fence you mended, the abandoned schoolhouse with the chalkboard still scrawled with fractions. And then, finally, the town sign, population. Who's left? As the road stretches out before you like a ribbon pulled tight by time, you feel something loosening inside. You're not running away, you're heading toward. The journey west isn't glamorous. It's 5 days of sweat, canned beans, rattling roads, and sleeping under stars so sharp they could cut you. You pass other migrants. Cars stacked with furniture, babies in crates, grandmothers knitting in the back of pickup beds. There's a silent understanding between all of you. No one asks, "Why are you leaving?" The dust has answered that for everyone. Historians still argue whether the Dust Bowl migrants were welcomed or resented in California. The truth is probably both. You see the signs before you even reach Bakersfield. Okies go home, no jobs here, and most chillingly, white trade only. But you also see hands waving. A man with a jug of water on the roadside. A woman handing out bread from a folding table. Mercy still blooms in dry places. You reach Weed Patch Camp just after noon on the 6th day. It's less a town than a patchwork quilt of hope and plywood. Rows of tiny shelters, communal kitchens, a schoolhouse made from an old church. But people are smiling, actually smiling. A wiry woman named Mrs. Adler gives you a tour. She's the unofficial mayor, nurse, and gossip mill all in one. "If your feet work, you'll find something," she says. "And if they don't, we'll still feed you. Just don't be lazy, and don't be cruel." The rules are pinned to a laundry line like Holy Scripture. No drinking, no fighting, help your neighbors, report illness. And the most sacred, everyone earns dignity here. Lionel signs up to dig irrigation lines. You land a job picking oranges at a grove 5 miles out. They bus you there in the back of a milk truck. And the ride smells like sour cream and orange blossoms. An odd cocktail of comfort. You work 12-hour days under a sun that doesn't know mercy. Fingers bleeding from the acid in the peels. But you whistle while you pick. Because you're breathing. Because the trees are green. Because the only thing falling from the sky is shade from the occasional cloud. At night, Weed Patch sings. Literally. Someone always pulls out a banjo, a fiddle, or just hums low enough for everyone to harmonize. You sit around fires made from fruit crates, sharing stories, tales about Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, about grandfathers who planted seeds with their bare hands, about sisters who stayed behind and vanished into the wind. One man talks about a dust storm so thick, it turned day to night in 20 minutes. Another claims the government invented the storm to punish farmers. That gets an eye roll and a shut up, Cal from the rest of the circle. You tell them about Clara. They nod like they know her, and maybe they do. Everyone here left someone behind who kept them breathing a little longer than they thought possible. One evening, you find a note tucked under your sleeping mat. No name, just handwriting you'd recognize anywhere. It reads, "Planted some turnips where you used to sit, in case you come back. See." You stare at the note until the fire dies out. The next day, you write a letter back. You don't say much, just that you're okay. That you haven't forgotten the stars above her barn. That you might write again if she wants you to. You walk it to the makeshift postbox, really just a coffee can nailed to a fence. But you put it in like it's sacred. That night it rains. Real rain. Not just a few guilty drops. but a proper storm, thumping the tin roofs like a jazz drummer with something to prove. You all run out like lunatics, arms stretched to the sky, faces turned upward like sunflowers suddenly remembering how to bloom. The camp becomes a sea of dancing fools and muddy joy. Lionel slips and pulls you down with him. You land on your back, laughing with a mouthful of California dirt. But for once, you don't spit it out. The next morning, you wake up to steam rising from the soaked ground and birds that weren't there the day before. Even the oranges smell sweeter. You sit on the step of your shelter, steaming coffee in your hands, the note from Clara folded in your shirt pocket. You don't know what comes next. But for now, the dust has settled. The rain doesn't last. You knew it wouldn't. But it changes things, if not the landscape, then the people. There's something different in the way everyone moves now, like they've remembered they have spines and souls. Even the camp rooster seems louder, more smug, like he conjured the storm himself. You try to thank him, but he pecks your boot. Classic. The land dries up fast. Too fast. By midweek, the ground cracks again, like it's rejecting the gift. The fields stay thirsty. The creeks retreat like shy children. But the air smells different, less like desperation, more like maybe. Work continues, sunburns deepen, and the orange groves start to feel like second homes. You learn to wear gloves under your gloves, tape your fingers with newspaper, and sing "You Are My Sunshine" with the other pickers until the trees feel like old friends. Then come the rumors. A new farm's hiring, better wages, 2 towns over. A government inspector's visiting the camp. The president might show up. No, really, he knows about us now. The last one's a long shot, but you still clean your boots. And amid the gossip, something stranger. The dust is back. Not like before, not full-bore Armageddon, but a creeping haze on the horizon. A reminder, a warning, like the land is whispering, "Don't forget me." You don't. You couldn't if you tried. One afternoon, while hauling crates of oranges onto the flatbed, you collapse. It's not dramatic. No wailing or fainting. Just a slow buckle, knees giving way like wet cardboard. Lionel's there in a flash, slapping your cheeks and yelling your name like it's a spell. Heat stroke, they say. Or maybe it's just exhaustion in a different outfit. They move you to the clinic tent, where Mrs. Adler presses something cold to your head and murmurs, "You're not a mule, sweetheart. Even machines rest." You spend 3 days horizontal, staring at the tent ceiling, which is just patched canvas and one rogue moth that seems intent on dying dramatically. In that time, you learn 80% of people here have some form of malnutrition. 3 families left last week. No one knows where. Clara hasn't written back. Not yet. On the 4th day, you get up and walk again. Not because you're ready, but because it's either that or dissolve into the mattress like a ghost story. The camp greets you with quiet nods and 2 boiled eggs. It's a feast. Historians still argue whether camps like Weed Patch actually helped people or just prolonged the suffering. But you've seen a man give his only pair of socks to a stranger. You've seen a girl learn to read by candlelight with fingers cracked from cold. If that's suffering, it's the kind that builds cathedrals. Then one night, the singing stops. It's the children. 4 of them sick, maybe 5. The youngest barely 2, coughing deep and rattly, like their little lungs are filling with ghosts. Nobody says the word, but you hear it in the silence. Pneumonia. The clinic tent overflows. People bring soup, blankets, even a radio to play lullabies. You offer to help, but Mrs. Adler tells you what you already know: you can't fix this one. You can only sit and not flinch. 2 nights later, a lantern stays lit all the way till dawn. That day, the sun rises and no one watches it. But later, someone starts to hum. A low, shaky tune that weaves through the camp like smoke. You join in. So does Lionel. So do the rest. It's not happy, but it's alive. And life out here is its own kind of rebellion. Your hands heal slowly. Your strength returns in uneven steps. You pick less now and talk more. You become one of the people newcomers ask for directions. That's how it happens. You don't notice becoming someone who belongs until someone assumes you do. One evening, you help build a new bunkhouse. It's mostly driftwood and optimism, but it holds. Someone paints a flower on the side, and it makes you grin so hard it hurts. Later, while sorting mail, Mrs. Adler waves you over. "Something from your ghost," she says, and hands you a letter. The handwriting stops your breath. "Clara." You don't open it right away. You take it to the edge of the camp, where the grass begins to lose interest in growing and the dust still whispers. Then you sit and tear the envelope like it's silk. The letter's short. 6 lines, 1 apology, 3 memories, and an invitation. "If the world breaks again, I hope we break together next time." You read it twice, then once more, aloud, to the dirt. You don't answer right away. Not because you don't want to, but because something inside you knows. She's not done writing, and neither are you. That night, a baby is born in the bunkhouse you helped build. A girl, squirming and furious and loud. They name her Hope, which everyone agrees is terribly on the nose but still perfect. You go to sleep with the stars pressing down on your roof, Clara's letter under your pillow, and the sound of a newborn wailing into the dust, as if daring the wind to take her. The first thing you notice when you wake is the quiet. Not silence, never silence, not here, but a kind of stillness, like the land is holding its breath. Hope's cry has faded to a coo, her world reduced to milk and heartbeat. You can hear her sometimes, nestled in her mother's arms in the new bunkhouse, making those small, curious sounds babies make when they're dreaming of nothing. You rise, stretch, and slip into your day. It's routine now: boil water, sweep dust from your cot, check the boards for jobs. Your boots feel like old friends, the kind who complain but still show up. You whistle a tune no one remembers teaching you. Maybe it was in the dirt all along. That morning, the camp gets a visitor. A man in a sharp hat and city shoes, looking like he lost a bet with the sun. He steps out of his car like he's afraid of catching something and holds a clipboard like it's a weapon. A government man. He walks the perimeter, pokes his nose in the kitchens, nods stiffly at children who stare at him like he's a talking tree. When he reaches you, he squints. "You work here?" he asks. You shrug. "I live here." He writes something down, probably sassy. Then he asks about your health, your wages, your intentions. You answer with your usual blend of honesty and sarcasm. And by the time he leaves, he's smiling like he hasn't in years. Later, someone says he's from the Farm Security Administration. Others say he's with the FBI. Lionel swears he saw him photographing outhouses. Either way, it feels like someone important has noticed your corner of the world and didn't immediately condemn it to flames. Historians still argue whether the FSA camps represented true progress or just a prettier form of containment. But in this moment, a stranger's visit feels like acknowledgement. Being seen. That night, you share the last of your sugar with Lionel to make weak lemonade. He toasts to being visible, and you clink tin cups with a grin. The next few weeks bring changes. A new teacher arrives, this one not afraid of dust or children with blunt questions. She sets up a little library and teaches the alphabet with patience and puppets. One puppet is a turtle named Mr. Slow, which you find too relatable for comfort. You start helping after dinner, reading aloud from old books by lantern light. You give each character a different voice and the kids squeal with glee. For 20 minutes a day, they forget their coughs and cracked feet. For 20 minutes a day, they're just children. One evening, after a particularly dramatic chapter of Tom Sawyer, a girl named Ruby asks, "Were there dust storms in the books back then?" You pause. "No," you say gently, "just fences you could climb and rivers you could swim." She nods. "I like that." You nod back. "Me too." One morning, the dust returns. Not as a wall, but as a ghost. It seeps in, fine and gray, like regret. It's not choking, but it's there. It covers the beans in the field, the clothes on the line, the sleeping baby's lashes. It whispers, "I'm not gone." The camp tightens. People speak in shorter sentences. They wash things twice. They keep one eye on the horizon and one on their children. You write a reply to Clara. It's long, rambling, full of too many commas. You tell her about hope, about the puppet turtle, about the lemonade made from stolen sugar. You say, I'm still afraid sometimes, and end with, but maybe that's proof I'm still trying. You don't send it. Not yet. You fold it, kiss the paper like a fool, and tuck it under your pillow next to hers. That night, you dream of rain again, but this time it sings. You wake to find Mrs. Adler gone. Just gone. Her cot empty. Her bag gone. No note. Some say she went north to a hospital in Oregon. Others say she was never real, just dust that knew how to knit. You keep waiting to feel the loss like a punch, but instead it lands like a feather. Soft, inevitable, as if she was only meant to stay as long as needed. The next day, you're asked to help run the clinic. You laugh and then you don't. And then you say yes, because someone has to remind these people that they're more than broken teeth and empty bellies. That dignity isn't a luxury. That being poor doesn't mean you stop matching. So you count pills and bandage blisters and tell an 8-year-old her cut will heal faster if she stops licking it. You say things like, it'll pass, and you're braver than you think, and you start to believe it yourself. One boy gives you a drawing, just a house and a tree and a sky that's blue instead of brown. You tape it to the wall with a smile. Historians still argue whether hope was a resource during the Dust Bowl, or a cruel trick that kept people rooted in ruin. But they never saw Ruby's eyes when you told her the dust wouldn't last forever. And for what it's worth, the wind does seem to be blowing softer these days. Maybe it's just you. Maybe it's just the wind. You're bent over a tub, scrubbing the only shirt you own that still has all its buttons, when the yelling starts. Not panic, not the urgent scream of fire or storm, but laughter. Real, full-bellied, no one died today laughter, the kind you can't fake. You abandon the soap midsuds and follow the sound until you reach the mess hall. And there, like an oasis conjured from fairy tales, is a delivery truck, its back doors yawning open like a treasure chest, revealing crates. Real wooden crates, not the splintery kind you repurpose into nightstands. Filled with food, supplies, even something suspiciously resembling peaches. There's a woman standing atop the truck bed, clipboard in one hand, lipstick like defiance. She calls out names and family sizes, assigning rations like a benevolent drill sergeant. Turns out she's with the Red Cross. They had extra stores from another relief camp that closed early, so someone decided to reallocate with compassion. You bite into a peach like it might vanish mid-chew. It's so sweet it stings. Juice dribbles down your wrist, and you don't even care. That night, the camp feels like a carnival. Someone pulls out a banjo, and for once, it's in tune. Kids run in circles, sticky with canned fruit and hope. Even Lionel tries to dance, though it looks more like he's dodging bees. You don't sing, but you hum. And when Ruby grabs your hand to spin you in a circle, you let her. Because when the world throws you a peach, you say thank you. The next morning, the dust tries again. Not a storm, just a warning. A warm wind with grit in its breath. It ruffles your blanket, rattles the chicken coop, reminds you this land still has teeth. But you're not scared. You've learned how to hold both joy and grit, full stomachs and scarred skies. This is the new balancing act. Dancing while dust tries to settle on your shoulders. You meet with the clinic team and draft a new health plan for the babies, extra vitamins if they're teething, twice weekly checks for coughs. You don't say it, but you're planning for tomorrow. That's new. Someone posts a notice on the main board. A literacy contest for kids under 12. Prize is a brand new pair of shoes. Ruby lights up like sunrise. She spends hours copying words from books and asking you to check her spelling. You tell her courage is a hard word to learn because sometimes grown-ups still get it wrong. She sticks her tongue out and writes it 3 times in all caps. Later that week, Clara's letter arrives. Your hands tremble as you read it. She writes about her new job at a switchboard, her landlady who makes soup that smells like your mother's, and a bookstore she visits just to breathe in old pages. She doesn't mention coming back, but she signs the letter. Tell Hope I said hello. And you, I hope you're still stubborn. You are. You hang her letter above your cot, next to the child's drawing of the blue sky. One evening, you walk past the rows of crops, the ones you planted, the ones that looked so hopeless months ago, and notice something new. Green. Not much. Just a shimmer. Like the land is lifting its eyebrows at you, saying, "Well, are you going to keep doubting me?" Historians still argue whether the end of the Dust Bowl came from changing weather patterns or from better land management strategies funded by the New Deal. You'd argue it came from people who didn't give up. People who learned to plant anyway, to sing anyway. You help organize a real school now. Not just books and puppets but math and science and history. Ruby wants to know what algebra is and why it sounds like a villain. You laugh and say, "It kind of is. Your hands aren't soft anymore, but they're steady. When you pull splinters or thread needles, they don't shake. You've become a kind of anchor here without realizing it." One night, someone sneaks into the mess hall and leaves a chalk drawing on the wall. A family under a tree, smiling, with a caption that says, "We're still here." The next day, the cook doesn't even yell about it. He just nods once and wipes his eyes when he thinks no one's looking. Even the dust seems to pause for that. You sit with Lionel under the stars one evening. Quiet, companionable, dust settling in your boots but not in your chest. He asks, "Think this'll all be history one day?" You shrug. A boring chapter in a school book. One question on a test. "But will they understand it?" he says. The dirt in your teeth. The way hope feels like a lie until it's not. You look at the stars and whisper, "Maybe someone will." Hope is asleep in her mother's arms again, her tiny fists unclenched for once. You watch her breathe, and it feels like a benediction. Maybe the wind took the land, but not your spirit. Not tonight. The wind, for once, rests. It's an unusual morning in the camp. Stillness presses down like a warm hand, the kind your mother used to place on your forehead when checking for fever. You step outside and inhale slowly, warily. The air is soft, cleanish. You don't trust it, not yet, but you want to. That shimmering thread of green you spotted last week has grown taller, bolder. A few of the older kids have taken to calling the sprouts dust rebels, because they're pushing up through soil that supposedly forgot how to hope. Ruby wins the literacy contest. She reads her story, The Girl Who Taught the Wind to Behave, in front of a dozen clapping parents and a local reporter with a fedora that's seen better days. Her new shoes are 2 sizes too big, but she wears them like glass slippers. You don't cry, not visibly, but something in your chest gets soft. Maybe softer than it's been since the day you first heard the storm howling toward your farmhouse. All those miles and years ago. You sit with Clara's letter in your lap and reread the line, "I hope you're still stubborn." You fold it neatly and slip it into your coat pocket, close to your heart. That night there's a dance. Yes, an actual dance. With music and pie and even strings of tin can lanterns looped between fence posts. Someone's uncle shows up with a fiddle, and suddenly the whole camp remembers how feet are meant to move. You dance with Ruby, then Hope's mother, then even Lionel, who shuffles like he's avoiding landmines but still grins like a man reborn. The dust doesn't vanish, but it retreats, like even it needs a nap. By now, you've stopped wondering if you'll ever go home. The camp is home, not because of walls or property lines, but because of shared stories, laughter, and the way people say your name like it matters. Historians still argue whether community camps like yours were effective or just temporary band-aids for a deeper economic wound. But to you, this place is proof that survival isn't just a word. It's a verb, one you conjugate daily with your hands, your heart, and your stubborn breath. You wake early the next morning and find Hope toddling toward you, holding a piece of bread like it's a rare gem. She says your name almost, just enough consonants to make your knees go soft. You scoop her up, kiss the dust from her forehead, and whisper, "We made it, little one, not to the end, but through enough." You spend the afternoon writing a letter to Clara. This time, you tell her everything, the crops, the contest, the chalk drawing, the dance. The moment Hope said your name, you finish with, "I don't know if the land will ever be the same, but I think we will." A month later, you get a reply. Clara writes, I'm coming to visit. Just for a week. I want to meet Ruby. And see the camp. And maybe see you. She doesn't say more. Doesn't need to. You clean your cot. You press your best shirt. You comb your hair until it doesn't resemble a tumbleweed. The morning Clara arrives. The dust tries one more time. Weak storm, nothing like before. Just a grouchy wind kicking up fuss. But you stand at the edge of camp, shirt buttoned, chin up, hands steady. And when she steps off the truck, you smile. Because this isn't just about dirt and loss and skies gone wrong. It's about stubborn roots and found families and the way joy sneaks in, even when the world is broken. The wind carries her perfume, lavender, maybe, or just memory. You walk side by side, not saying much. Don't need to. The land is still scarred. But there's green now. And where there's green, there's a future. Even if the wind tries again. You settle into the quiet now, the storm long gone. Imagine your body sinking into a hammock suspended between tall trees. Roots deep, branches high, the sky above you stretching wide and calm. There's the soft hush of wind, but it's gentler now, more like a lullaby than a threat. You feel the earth below, not choking, but breathing again. The dust has settled, at least for tonight. The sky has cleared, at least for now. And inside you a small warmth grows. The kind of warmth that says, you're still here. You picture Ruby's shoes squeaking across wood floors. Hope's tiny hands reaching up. Clara's laughter arriving on a train, wrapped in sunlight. Each moment folding over you like a blanket. And the dust? It doesn't win. Not entirely. Because you remembered how to laugh. How to plant. How to sing in kitchens made from canvas and stubborn will. So as you drift off, let the wind be soft. Let it carry your dreams over green shoots and quiet nights. You've come far and there's peace here now. Close your eyes. The land will keep its rhythm. And you, well, you've earned your rest.